Detain, deport, ban. The government prepares a new crackdown on small boat crossings.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock. It's Monday, the 6th of March. This is Breakfast on GBNews with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, asylum seekers who cross the channel in small boats will be removed from the country and banned from returning under new plans to be announced by the Home Secretary. The scheme, which could see thousands sent to Rwanda, will reportedly cost £3 billion.
Ambulance strikes due to take place today have been called off as the Unite Union enters pay talks with the government. It comes after the Unison and GMB unions also put walkouts on hold following what they've called a huge shift in the government's position.
The country's most notorious prisoner, Charles Bronson, will launch a bid for freedom at a public parole hearing today. The parole board review will make Bronson the second inmate in British legal history to have his case heard in public.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have been invited to the King's coronation. A spokesperson said Harry and Meghan received correspondence from the King, but the statement did not disclose whether or not they would attend.
Right, we've got a lot coming up on the show today. There's an awful lot to get through. I mean, that whole Charles Bronson situation, public parole board today. Meghan and Harry, have they been invited to the royal wedding or not? We believe they have been, but they are not immediately biting the hand of the palace off. They're keeping them waiting for their reply.
And there's so much news about. I heard it being, proposed in the newsroom that we cancel the sport today. You'd be in favour of that?
You think you're funny?
I do think
you're funny. I think you're funny. That's you and me finished. Finished. Get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email gbviews@gbnews.uk and let us know where you're watching or listening from. Top story on this Monday morning. The government is to announce a fresh crackdown on illegal migration, with asylum seekers who enter the UK with small boats facing immediate removal and a lifetime ban.
Yeah, this is a £3 billion plan. It could see thousands sent to Rwanda and other countries using a so-called human rights break to stop lawyers interfering with deportation flights. Well,
joining us now in the studio, the former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib here. Ben, do you get any sort of idea that this may be the plan that fixes migration, illegal migration?
Well, I've felt for a long time that the government's got this back to front. Border control is not a function of your deportation policy. Deportation is what you need when border control has failed.
Right.
And what we've got effectively is a border force that just is unable to do its job. And no matter what number of legal provisions the government introduce, I think it's going to be virtually impossible for them to actually have an effect on these illegal crossings of the Channel through deportation. These latest plans, which effectively are meant to ban anyone who's come into the United Kingdom illegally from even making an asylum claim, would require them to disapply to some significant extent the European Convention of Human Rights. And that is fraught with trouble. First of all, it would be a breach of the Belfast Agreement. We're only a week on from the Prime Minister and Ursula von der Leyen beating their moral chests and promoting, the importance of the Belfast Agreement and how they're going to make sure that it was adhered to in all its dimensions. But a key part of that agreement is a commitment by the United Kingdom to the European Convention of Human Rights. So that's a problem. Yeah. We've also committed to staying in the ECHR in the new trading agreement that we have with the EU. So we've got treaty problems with disapplying it. And then, of course, you're going to have problems getting that through Parliament. You can imagine the kind of pushback that they will get in the Commons and then the Lords. So I think the legislative approach is going to be extremely challenging for the government. And then even if they get that through, they've got to then send these people somewhere. Now, a lot of these people come from countries with whom we don't have an agreement for deportation. So what do we do there? Shamima Begum, for example, if she came across on a boat and we wanted to enforce these new laws against her, where would we send her? She's stateless. So, I think, as with so many of these government policies on trying to stop illegal crossings of the Channel, It's all great fanfare, but no real substance.
Right, so it sounds tough, it makes headlines, but you don't think it's workable?
I don't think it works. I mean, you know, fundamentally, border control is not about deportation. Deportation is what you do when border control fails. We need proper border control.
But Ben, I mean, is that factored in, do you think? I mean, perhaps they're aware that this possibly won't work, but it's the look that they need for political reasons, because this is hugely popular with the grassroots. It will do well in elections. The Tories know that the British public across the board are very concerned about this. Whether or not it's able to happen is another matter. I mean, Priti Patel saying that the laws that are already in place could actually do what the proposing to do with these new laws. It doesn't really work. The point is, it seems to be
sounds as if it does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the point you make is a very pertinent one. And we've had this before, of course, with the Nationality and Borders Bill, which was introduced by Priti Patel. And she said at the time that there was to sort everything out. And then we had the Rwanda plan, and not a single individual is yet to go to Rwanda. I think they managed to get one person onto the aeroplane, and he was effectively blocked by the European Court of Human Rights. So the drawback with the government's approach, if it is just playing the 24-hour news cycle trying to keep grassroots happy, is that this is not a problem that disappears off the front pages. It's a very visual problem. You've got thousands of people crossing the channel every week, and there's no amount of trumpeting your own legislative framework that's going to get around those optics.
Well, let's see. Let's bring a lawyer in on this. Skylar McKeith, who's an immigration lawyer, with her views on all of this. Skylar, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You've heard what Ben has had to say about this. He doesn't think this is workable. Are you alarmed by what you're hearing?
No, I'm in complete agreement. The government absolutely needs to implement a new strategy, but it will definitely be fought. If this proposal is accurate, it may be faced with backlash, potential legal challenges, as asylum claims would essentially automatically be void if the individuals arrived by boat. Also, individuals must not be left in limbo while waiting for third countries to agree to admit them. So we could potentially see issues here with UK arrivees being left in limbo, waiting for safe third countries to admit them. It's a positive step forward on the Prime Minister's part. He's committed to clearing the initial asylum decision backlog, but it's potentially going to be very problematic because it may very well be incompatible with international laws. So, for example, it could be incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, and there may be pushback on the proposed bill, similar to what we've seen with the Rwanda removal flights, and there have so far been no removal flights to date. So, and as a signatory to the Refugee Convention, the UK fully considers all asylum applications lodged in the UK, but there could be serious backlash with this proposal.
About the legal side of this, we talked about the politics. The moral side to it, I suppose the human element to it, has to be discussed as well. Yeah. How do genuine asylum seekers, people who are fleeing war and conflict, under these new proposals, how do they legally seek asylum in this country?
So that's the problem. This is going to cause an issue across the board, because we've had a situation where there have been so many people crossing this channel, and they're coming from safe countries. Their origins are safe countries. And so we're going to have a problem now where there are going to be genuine refugees that are going to suffer even more because of this. Well, I mean, it's probably not even going to go through because it's going to be fraught with so many challenges, to be honest. I'm sure it's going to have many legal challenges. So, okay. And the other issue is there has been such a backlog that has really caused a lot of problems in the courts, and the cost of housing asylum seekers are very high for the taxpayer. And these current asylum seekers that are in the UK have spent very long periods of time in UK accommodation sites. They're not allowed to work for the first 12 months of their claims. There's now major backlog. Over 160,000 people are awaiting initial decisions on their claims, and it's a huge issue.
Well, everything's a huge issue related to it, Skylar. People who listen to us and watch us, they'll be in touch. They'll be in touch today, and they will say, and I just want to bring this up with Ben. Ben, they're going to say, we can't get our kids into schools, we can't get housing, we can't get jobs, we can't get this, because they will say there's disruption in their local community as well, housing asylum seekers in hotels. They will say all of this relates to this problem. They'll also say that there's this word break that comes up. Is it?
He likes the word break now, doesn't he, the Prime Minister?
This is the end thing. So there's the Stormont break.
I know, which doesn't work, by the way.
Right, and then there's whatever goes on here as well. So is he suggesting, and I'll be interested in Skylar's opinion on this too, that their human rights will be postponed?
Well, I mean, that's the point, Eamonn. You know, we're a first world country that champions human rights. Are we really going to deny people the right to make an application for asylum while they're in the UK?
Well, I'll tell you this, right? So say I'm in Afghanistan and the Taliban are holding a gun to my head and I think I got to get out of here, right? So I make my way across, I eventually get to Britain. Whatever's going on here ain't going to delay me, ain't going to stop me from going to Britain, is what I'm trying to say, because it's better than the alternative.
Absolutely. The whole premise of this sort of enhanced deportation programme is a deterrence. But a deterrence only works if actually what's better on the other side, you know, what's on the other side is better. But as you rightly say, Eamonn, these people are threatened in their own countries. They're threatened, their lives are threatened. If they've got religious beliefs that aren't tolerated, they can be tortured. If they've got sexual preferences that aren't acceptable, you know, so it's never going to be worthwhile for them to stay where they are. It's always going to be worthwhile to roll the dice and have a go at coming to the United Kingdom. And, I mean, Skylar made a very good point about you know, the cost of all of this, and as did you, Eamonn. You know, we are in a cost of living crisis. This thing is costing us, just to house them, $3 billion a year. And then on top of that, there's NHS, dental, and we give them cash and all the rest of it. So we're talking about $5 or $6 billion a year, in my estimate. And that's half of the net cost to the taxpayer if we gave every public sector employee a wage increase of 10%. And that's half going, and that's on the number of people we've already got in this country. It's forecast to go up to something between 65 and 70,000 crossing the Channel this year. And that's only about the numbers we know about.
But to be fair, I mean, Rishi Sunak's been quoted in the papers this morning as saying the cost to the taxpayer is unacceptable, and this is why he's made it one of his top 5 priorities to try and halve the number by the end of the year. He is well aware, obviously former Chancellor, of those costs, which is why, presumably, he wants to try and solve this problem.
But you don't do it.
You
don't do it by paying the French £63 million a year, creating a kind of moral hazard for the British government, because the French, if they actually did their job, would give up their £63 million a year. And why would they wish these would-be illegal crossings to stop? Because they'd end up with the problem in their own shores. The only agreement that works with France, and I'm going to put it out there, is they lose their fishing licences if they don't get a grip of this problem. But, of course, we haven't got the political courage to do that. And if and until we develop political will to actually get a grip of this problem in the sea, we're not going to stop these. But
if I was in France, I'd be saying, well, look, you think you've got a problem. We've got 3 times a bigger problem.
They've got a huge problem.
Than you have. So why am I in the business of...
180,000 a year.
Yeah, it is complex. Ben, really appreciate your take on things. Skylar, we've got to leave it there, but thank you very much for your contribution on all of this. Thank you very much indeed. Now, today, big story that we're going to feature on this programme today, and we want to know your views on it. He is the most notorious prisoner in Britain. He is Charles Bronson. He will appear before a parole board as he attempts to win his freedom after nearly 50 years behind bars.
And get this, it will only be the second time in UK legal history that an inmate will have their case heard in public.
Well, let's speak to the man who represented Charles Bronson at his last parole hearing, John Turner. And it wasn't successful then, John. Why wasn't it?
Good morning. When I last represented Charles in 2017, we didn't, in fact, make an application for release. We asked the parole board to comment on whether he should be allowed to progress from the very high secure conditions he finds himself in and which he remains in to this day.
We just got to make clear to people actually as to why he is behind bars. It is complex. He fervently believes he should be out. Looking at his case, I look and I think maybe this man is in the wrong institution. If he's anywhere, he certainly has got his issues. He certainly has his problems. Would you care to highlight why he's behind bars and why so long?
Well, Charlie was originally imprisoned way back in 1974 for armed robbery. And what we've seen since then is a series of offences, the vast majority of which have occurred behind prison bars. They've occurred in prison. And if you were to speak to Charlie today, which unfortunately, of course, you can't, he would be the first to admit that he's fought the system. But the system has fought him back, and it continues to do so.
It's fascinating. I mean, there's been another high-profile discussion about parole this week. The case of Joanna Brown. She was violently murdered by her own husband with a claw hammer. And yet they're talking about him possibly being released soon. And yet here we have somebody, as you say, who just committed an armed robbery, still struggling to get released after all these years. I suppose it begs the question of whether or not prison is the right place, as Eamonn says, but actually can make people worse almost. He's committed more crimes, solitary confinement for huge periods of that. I mean,
so he's committed more crimes in prison than he has out of prison. And we should say, I think, John, people think he's murdered someone or he's raped someone or he's done something. I mean, he has done a heinous thing, running around with a shotgun and whatever, but maybe not as bad as people believe or led to believe.
Well, that is why this case is so unique, Eamonn. If you were to approach people on the street and to talk about Charlie, you yourself introduced him as being Britain's most notorious prisoner, and that is frequently how he's introduced in the news, in newspapers and the various broadcasts that we've seen about him. But if you really strip it all down and look at this case, he hasn't been convicted of murder. He's never raped anyone. He's never offended against children. And it begs the question, is he really Britain's most notorious prisoner when we consider that within our system we have the killers of Lee Rigby, Levi Belfield, and Ian Huntley, to name but a few? Can we really say that someone convicted of Charlie's crimes is in fact the most notorious prisoner? But to come to your point as to whether the environment he finds himself in has contributed to his history, unquestionably it has. He is a product of the system in which he finds himself. And to put things in some perspective, he's imprisoned in what we call a close supervision centre. This is, in effect, a prison within a prison. He spends 23 hours of the day in his cell. He gets an hour of recreation. And that recreation will be, again, on his own in a small exercise yard. It's hard to imagine what 40 to 50 years of that sort of detention will do to a man.
John, I get that, and you paint the picture very, very well. If you were sitting on that parole board today, what way would you vote?
It's difficult for me to comment, Eamonn. I'm not instructed currently, but I have followed the case, as you would imagine I have. There's been no violence since 2018. The last criminal charge was back in 2014. And he is a man who's now, he's either approaching 70 or he's 70. I'm not entirely sure on that. He is now, and I will say this, it's a bold statement, I think he is a political prisoner because he's held in these extremely secure and almost alien conditions that I've described to you just now. He's not being given any opportunity to meaningfully show to anybody, and that's particularly the parole board, that he can be trusted or he can be live a more pro-social life in the community or even in less secure prison conditions. So if I was sitting on the parole board today, I certainly would be hoping, given that we haven't seen any demonstrated violence for quite a number of years, as I've explained, I would be hoping that progress can be made. And if that can't be for release into the community, which would be unquestionably would be a huge step from the conditions he finds himself in currently. I would certainly be hoping that progress could be made through the system, perhaps to open conditions, which is something your listeners and yourselves may have heard of, where prisoners are tested in an environment which is more similar to what we see in the community, where prisoners are gradually introduced into the community.
Well, it is fascinating to hear from you, John, and we're going to get lots of opinions on this today as the story develops throughout the day ahead. John Turner's a prison law solicitor. He's represented Charles Bronson before to get parole, but didn't get it. Will it change today? John, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. 6:20 is the time. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
And some big breaking news whilst you've been asleep. Police in Wales, searching for 3 women and 2 men, have now found 3 of them dead and 2 seriously injured. The 5 people were reported missing after a night out in Cardiff over the weekend. Gwent Police believes the car was involved in a road traffic collision and came off the A48. The identities of those who died have not yet been confirmed.
The former police officer Wayne Couzens will be sentenced later today for indecent exposure. The 50-year-old is already serving a whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard. The sentence today is for 3 incidents of flashing before killing Miss Everard, which he pleaded guilty to last month.
Boris Johnson has put his father, Stanley Johnson, forward for a knighthood as part of his resignation honours list. That's according to The Times. The former Prime Minister faced accusations of cronyism in 2020 after he nominated his brother, Joe Johnson, for a peerage. It calls it his resignation list, but he didn't really resign, did he? But he's not going to call it that. His being forced out of office list.
Yes.
Just saying. It's funny how he's calling it his resignation list. Anyway, what do you think? Should his father get a place?
Don't think he'd be nominating us for anything.
In the Lords. Well.
No. So, right. His brother did get a peerage.
He did?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it's perfectly normal. They often, all coming out of office, get the opportunity to do that, and that's, his right. It's pictured on the front of the paper there.
Now, Prince Harry and Meghan, right? So, what's going on now? Have they got an invitation to the coronation? We think they have. They are in correspondence with the palace, but they're holding back and they say, we haven't decided if we'll attend yet. So, what do you think about that one? Let us know.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 6:24 is the time. Still to come on the programme this morning.
We'll be taking a look at a new documentary that explores how a potentially career-ending expose about George Michael's sexuality made him into a gay icon.
And Charles Bronson will face a public parole board later today. At 7:10, we'll ask Britain's longest-serving prisoner who knew Bronson what he makes of the man behind the bars.
OK, get in touch. We want to hear your views. Bronson, in or out? He's approaching 70 years of age. Is he still a danger to society? He hasn't murdered anyone. He hasn't raped anyone. He did run around with a shotgun, which makes him pretty dangerous. But he spent all the time has been added to his sentence because he doesn't get on well with prison guards. Put it that way. GB Views at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News.
So Prince Harry and Meghan have been invited to the coronation of King Charles in May, but they are refusing to confirm whether they'll be attending.
Who cares? OK, here with more on this, royal showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield. And Kinsey, when I say who cares, I mean, we all care. We all care what you have to say. We all care about the coronation and whatever. But again, they're very successfully making this all about them. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Eamonn. I was so happy to see you on this morning, and then you open it with "Who cares?" I'm hurt. No, this is they love the will they or won't they game, but a part of me feels like perhaps Harry and Meghan aren't answering whether or not they're attending the coronation because of security concerns. Harry's currently suing the government over police protection. Spare, his book, where he talks about the 25 people he killed in Afghanistan, has heightened the concern over security for Prince Harry. And honestly, there is speculation that a part of the reason that Harry and Meghan lost Frogmore was over security concerns. Is their presence there, within the Windsor estate, could it jeopardize or put any other members of the royal family in jeopardy because of the things they say and do outside of the royal family? So this really, truly might be less about attention seeking and more about security concerns.
It's really hard to understand what's going on behind the scenes, isn't it? Because over the weekend or at the end of last week, we heard that after the release of the book and the insults of Camilla, the King said, right, that's it, out of Frogmore. And then over the weekend, we read, OK, you can stay at Frogmore, but if you come to the coronation. So does he want him to come or not?
I think he does definitely want him to come. It's a win-win situation for both of them because the king is not humiliated by the lack of his son being there. And then Harry gets to run off and monetize his relationship with his family. It's chapter 474 of Spare on paperback, But there also are reports that Charles plans to give them a suite, an apartment in Buckingham Palace, because they no longer have Frogmore available to them. And ironically, that suite used to belong to Prince Andrew. So it's a bit of just a swap,
Fascinating. And what about all the sort of public, what would you call it, therapy sessions that Harry's been having, talking about monetising things? He's been monetising his troubles, has he not?
Well, the most interesting part of that conversation that happened over the weekend was his, openness to discuss drug use, Isabel. And it actually opens up immigration concerns here in the state. Was he open about all of the cocaine, marijuana, and hallucinogenics he discussed taking when he was applying to become an actual member of the United States or to live here in the United States? I think that that's up in the air. And I think that could bring up some real concerns with immigration. I'm surprised that he spoke so openly and candidly about drug use and how comfortable he was with it. And I think a lot of people were disappointed by that particular part of the conversation.
Think like the rest of us. Why are we debating this? Why are we even indulging both of them with all of this? It is make your mind up time. There's an invite there if you want it. Are you coming? Are you not? Why are they dragging it out?
Look, Eamon, I'm going to be there. So I think that that's the real breaking news here. I'm coming. I'm going to sit next to you, throw my arms around you. And I think that that's pretty exciting. But it's like I said, it could be security concerns. I know I am sick of the debate, too. It feels like it's never ending, but it keeps them in the papers. And Harry, there are warehouses and warehouses full of spare that he needs to get in the hands of a consumer. And I think that this might be one of their strategies.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Now, you say there are warehouses full of that book, but we're also told this is the biggest selling book or the fastest selling or something selling book in the history of the planet. What is it?
It can be both. It can be a fast-selling book, and they might have printed too many copies because they overprinted copies, and that's the situation we're dealing with. Because there are boxes in warehouses full of spare that people didn't buy, and that's why Harry's doing a pay-per-view chat. Everybody that watched that chat over the weekend had to pay for it, and they got a copy of spare. #blessed. And that was just a ploy to make sure that they could sell additional copies of that book.
Yeah, you know, Kinsey, you hit the nail on the head when you said, you know, you're kind of sick of talking about this. You came into this job because you love the royal family and royal watching, and it has just become this kind of psychodrama of Harry and Meghan, kind of ruining it all. We just want to celebrate the coronation. We don't want to think about this. It's such a shame, don't you think? Such a shame. Anyway, Kinsey, we've got more from you a little bit later on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, look, yeah, we'll speak to you again after 7 o'clock this morning, I think. Thank you very much indeed. And looking ahead, 8:45, we're going to have more on this. We've got the royal author Tom Bauer, who says Harry's memoir should be renamed from Spare to Spite. OK? What do you think? Coming up, Giles Brand celebrated his 75th birthday on stage this weekend with several dames. Christopher Biggins
being one of them.
Yeah. We'll be asking him all about it and going through today's papers with the Mail on Sunday's Anna Mikhailova after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Time approaching 25 to 7 on this Monday morning.
Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages of the newspapers. Here's the Times. It's leading with the government's plans to ban asylum seekers who arrive in the UK on small boats.
The Eye reports that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are set to clash with Conservative MPs over their tax plans in the budget.
The Mirror claims 11 million people are suffering without dental care, with patients even resorting to pulling out their own teeth as they wait for an appointment. Absolutely awful.
And The Sun says a Live Aid-style concert's being planned for Wembley in June to support Ukraine.
Well, joining us to go through the papers this morning in more detail is the actor Christopher Biggins and the Deputy Political Editor of The Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
A mixture of front pages on the papers, but a lot of them featuring this story, Anna, that you've chosen on the front of the Times. Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman's big, new, bold plans to try and tackle illegal crossings.
Exactly. But is it big and is it bold is the million-dollar question. This is Rishi Sunak trying to capitalise on his big success with Brexit, trying to fix his next priority, which is small boats. And he's going to announce that people who come in here illegally will never be allowed to come back effectively. So they're trying to do this new deterrent. Critics say that this is essentially window dressing. It's similar to laws that we already have. And personally, I sort of read and I thought, you know, people who are already coming in by small boats have presumably already exhausted the visa route. I mean, you sort of find it slightly strange that someone would go to that desperate a measure and then, oh, well, I'll apply for a tourist visa. You know, it seems like an odd deterrent, but that's...
That being said, Rishi Sunak's trademark is to under-promise and over-deliver. You wouldn't think he would pin his reputation to something if he didn't think he was onto something, or would you?
Well, we shall see. I mean, he is trying to build a reputation as someone who delivers. You're right. I think with Brexit, we certainly saw that. Is this a way of kind of riding in on the coattails of that and try and paint this as similar? Because so far from what we've seen, this doesn't look like any kind of... Well, we shall see. But I think that the stark reality is we've got more than double the number of people coming across in small boats compared to last year.
And people are having their say on this morning. Let me just take Jim as an example. Biggins, he says, read this new law. We will believe it when we see it, I suppose. I still dislike how somehow we have to assume responsibility for them being the migrants, simply by arriving on our shores at our expense. So here's the point. To me, if I was fleeing from some hostile, awful regime in Iran or Syria or Afghanistan or whatever, and Britain was my destination, it's still better than the alternative. It's still better than getting a bullet through the head or detained or put in jail. So it doesn't really matter what happens to me when I get here, as long as I get here.
Absolutely. And that is why so many people try to get here. And they pay extortionate prices to get here to criminals who take... Those are the people I really am against, because they know these people taking huge amounts of money, they're not going to make it, or very rarely do they make it. And, you know, tens of hundreds of people die, and it's so wrong.
It just seems as though there should be a better way to be able to distinguish between those people who are genuinely fleeing a bullet to the head and those who are coming from Albania on a bit of a speculative, wanting a better life. I mean, we can't blame them for that, but equally we can't afford to take everybody in. So, you know, the Albanian dilemma has to be separate from people who are fleeing.
Yeah, quite right. And there's no solution to this yet. The cost point that your viewer excellently mentions is another good one, because so the Times are saying this looks like it'll cost another $3 billion a year. That's on top of the current $3 billion a year we're spending. And, you know, unless you're actually seeing results, which so far no one has, I mean, that's a lot of money to spend.
Yeah, as Anna says, unless we're seeing results, well, everybody hopes they're going to get a result, but will they? What's your view? What way do you think the situation should be solved? Right, we go to you, Chris, and we've got the Times, and this says basically, if you're applying for a job, if you're going to a job interview, the trick to have up your sleeve is
A smile.
Right.
Yes. I mean, do you really want to smile? Yes. Say it with a winning smile, then.
You've got a winning smile, Big
Well,
Jim.
that's why I get all the jobs.
Exactly.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense, this statement, because I think if someone goes in for a job and they're doing, and they sit there and they're doing, you catch that depression.
They drain the energy.
They drain. Very good expression. They drain. Thank goodness you're here, Eamonn. They drain. Absolutely drain. And if someone walks into it, it's like when you auditions for parts in plays and television. If you go in and you're high up, and you have tremendous energy, it's great. So you're more likely to get the part.
Well, there you go, top tip there.
See, I tell you all the time, if you just would smile a bit more.
My husband does say I have a resting face, so I do need to smile a bit more.
No, I don't think you do. I think when your smile is gorgeous.
You don't have to work with her. Anyway, in tests on 280 people, workers rated candidates who smiled in photos on job site LinkedIn as more competent than those with neutral expressions. So there you are, you can bluff anybody just by smiling. It's the way to do it.
Right, let's talk about Matt Hancock. Anna, we can't get away from him, can we? Every day for the next little while, he's going to be gracing the front of the Telegraph. What's he said now?
So the latest is Matt Hancock said to Professor Chris Whitty when he was told that you need to effectively... remember when we had the 14-day quarantine, when everyone was getting pinged. So Chris Whitty said to Matt Hancock back in November 2020 that having a 5-day testing regime, so if someone tests every day for 5 days, that will be as effective as the 14 days we had. And Matt Hancock, in these text messages, rejects it on the basis of it would imply we'd been getting it wrong. So he also says he didn't want to seriously worry people, but what we saw yesterday, where he almost intentionally wanted to worry people with a strain, I mean, I think the concern over how the government was perceived appears to be coming out of this data dump as more and more of the driver, where we were told so many times they were following the science, and here they've got the science telling them, stop back,
What becomes clear and clearer, it was all about the political look. I mean, if basically Hancock was in favour then of people being out of circulation for 10 days as opposed to halving that time, and on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer.
Remember how crippling this was for businesses, for the NHS.
Families as well.
Families especially. I mean, that was just terrible.
And we all know the people who got pinged many, many times. You just sort of look at this and think, well, it's all like a bad dream to a lot of us now.
But look, I'm not here to defend Matt Hancock in any shape or form, but equally, everything has to be viewed through the prism. I mean, we're looking at it with hindsight, and actually being seen to know what you were doing and be in control is important when you are dealing with a crisis. So does he have a legitimate point that, look, if we row back on this, even though, it's the wrong thing to do, I mean, it's easy to say that now, but you can see why that was part of it.
But he's not arguing about control. He's not arguing about enforcement.
Well, he was saying it might help adherence. Is that in the context
Chris Whitty actually says...
But if you actually say to the public, and if you say, look, we're looking at this science, things are changing, we now think this is the best way of doing this.
Which they did many times with other things, don't forget. I think the problem... It's a good point, but when they're saying that... this is effectively about the perception of the government. This is a problem now because when the next crisis comes, everyone's going to look at them and say, well, why should we believe you? You're not following the science. You're thinking about how you look.
Interesting point. Because let's talk about this concert at Wembley that's being proposed, a Live Aid-style benefit concert in June to help victims of Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, I mean, it's saying that the A-listers to turn up the heat on Vlad.
Have you been invited?
No, not yet. I doubt I will. My singing is not the greatest, and I don't think the Wembley is ready for me yet. But it's interesting, in the paper today, it says invited to appear have been U2, The Killers, Rolling Stones, Pink. Also on the wanted list, Florence and the Machine, Noel Gallagher, Adele, Sir Paul McCartney. I mean, it could be the most wonderful since the last Live Aid we had, and which was fantastic. And I think it's great that people are coming out to support Ukraine, because it's such a horrible situation, which seems just to go on. And I just don't know what we can do about it. I mean, we know we're so near, and we could be involved in a big way, in which we're involved anyway, I think, by quite rightly sending them help. But it is a horrible situation.
But this is a way people can all feel like they're doing something.
Yes, and they can raise a lot of money. And a party as well.
Win-win.
Exactly.
Talking about awful situations, in the Mail, they're talking about Harry and Meghan. They can have use of Frogmore Cottage, sort of Frogmore Mansion, whatever it is.
But they did spend a lot of money on it, didn't they?
It's a big place. It's a big place.
I think the king, technically,
They paid it
money.
back. They paid it back when they moved. So it was 2.4 million, the renovations.
Yeah.
And then when they moved, they left the royal family, they paid it back in half.
Doesn't he pay their allowance?
Oh, I suppose, technically. Or Netflix now.
Well, if they're invited to... Well, we believe they have been invited to the coronation. They haven't decided what they're going to do yet. What way do you read it, Anna?
So... this is, they've been told that they can use Frogmore Cottage, despite having been served a notice to quit in January. And I think the idea is that the palace doesn't want the perception that they've been essentially invited, but then also making things difficult for them in terms of their security. Because obviously one thing that Prince Harry likes to talk about a lot is he doesn't have the adequate security for his family, and Frogmore Cottage is one place that's safe. So I think by saying, well, you can use it for this period, then there can be no claim to say, oh, you've made it difficult for them to come. So now we're just waiting to see if they will come. And as the Daily Mail says, make your mind up time for Harry. But I suspect they will string it out.
OK, what do you think are the pros and cons of them going or not going? I mean, would any of us miss them if they were not there?
I think we possibly won't. I think Netflix would enjoy an attendance because that would bring them part two. No, I think, you know, as lots of people said, on a more serious point, the coronation isn't about them. So...
But I think that, you know, one of the most important things is how they're going to go down with the public. That is the other thing. I mean, they could arrive and they could be booed. And I think the public have turned against them since the book and since all the TVs and things.
Yeah.
And I think it's not a good time for them.
I think that from Buckingham Palace's point of view, I mean, it's a worry if they don't come because it gives them a grievance, and the grievance gives them more material for future books, for future operas. So I can see why the king is keen for him to come. Keep your enemies close.
Absolutely. And I think Charles is a good father, you see, and I think, you know, he really wants his son to be there, which I think is great.
Piggins, last night we came on stage at the London Palladium to raise funds for Great Ormond Street Hospital and to celebrate the 75th birthday of Giles Brandreth. Were you booed?
No, I wasn't, funny enough.
So I'm sure you weren't.
I was cheered, and I was greatly honoured that Giles asked me to come on at the end.
Now, which one are you? Which one are you there in that?
No, there I am. Look there. That's me.
Oh.
That's in the red wig. And I said, I thank.
Do you keep that costume at home?
No, don't be silly. No, it was. How dare you? No, but Joan Collins, I said, thank you, Joan, for the loan of the costume. And I was very careful about the wig. And I said, and Maureen Lipman, thank you for the wig. But Maureen was particularly funny. Joan read Imagine, the poem, the song, John Lennon's song, and she was brilliant. The whole thing was wonderful. I mean, it was a great tribute to all our great dames. And they were all there. I mean, there was I've got a list here. There was Eileen Atkins, Flora Benjamin, Joan Collins, Judi Dench, Sheila Hancock, Twiggy Lawson, Maureen Lipman, Joanna Lumley, Patricia Routledge. Patricia Routledge was fantastic. And Harriet Walter and Penelope Wilton. It was a really great evening.
Why all these dames for Giles Brandreth's 75th, though? I mean, it's wonderful.
He is the best connected person.
Yes, he is.
He was like that with Prince Philip as well. You know, he knows everyone,
He does.
He's like you.
Yeah.
He knows everybody.
There you go. Well, what a night.
It was a night.
It was a night.
No, it was a great evening. It really was.
Lovely. Guys, thank you both very much indeed. Really appreciated that. Anna and Christopher will be back in about 40 minutes' time. Thank you very much. The time now, 12 minutes before 7 o'clock.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. The Refugee Council is warning that thousands of asylum seekers will be left permanently in limbo as a result of proposed small boat legislation set to be announced tomorrow. The organisation says government plans could effectively shatter the UK's commitments under the UN Refugee Convention to give people a fair hearing, regardless of their route to this country.
The trial of a man accused of murdering Olivia Pratt-Korbel is set to start today. The 9-year-old was fatally shot at her home in Liverpool in August last year. Thomas Cashman denies the murder. The trial is expected to last 4 weeks at Manchester Court.
And the notorious prisoner Charles Bronson will make a bid to get out of jail this week in a public parole hearing. Bronson's been behind bars for most of the last 50 years for crimes such as hostage-taking and armed robbery. He says he wants to be released to enjoy what's left of his life.
Six years since George Michael died, but a new documentary is shining a spotlight on his relationship with the press as they attempted to release details about his sexual orientation.
Well, the film will cover how the possibly career-ending expose became a defining moment for the LGBTQ movement. Here's a short taste of what's in store.
George, are you gay?
I don't think it's anybody's business.
I kissed the boy and I did.
Pop star George Michael was caught with his pants down in a public men's room.
I kind of knew it was coming. You can only dance with the devil so many times.
If we decided we were going to get someone, they were going to get got.
The tabloids, they knew people's secrets, sold stories.
But it was up to him to decide how to end it. He said, I'm going to say what I have to say.
I kissed the boy and I liked it.
I'm still so proud of him for that.
Wow.
It's called Careless Whispers. You can see it tonight on Channel 4, and tomorrow night it's a two-parter at 9 o'clock.
Actually, Eamonn, it's called George Michael Outed.
Outed?
Yeah, Outed.
Oh.
That's the name of the
As you
documentary.
can see, Showbiz reporter Stephanie Tucci's here with all the details.
Sorry
on
about
this. Do you know
that.
what? It's a real sign of the times.
Yeah.
How the world has changed. Can you imagine a world now where an artist was being hounded to come out in a way? It's just
not in this generation of wokery and being politically correct. You know, back in 1998, the showbiz industry was different. The media had much more access to hound celebrities. You know, with George Michael, for the first 2 decades of his career, his personal life was very much lived in the closet. And it wasn't until that scandal where he was arrested for committed a lewd act in a, Beverly Hills toilet, where it was actually a part of an undercover police operation where he was forced to come out and openly say he was gay, which obviously wasn't a nice way to do that. Back then, being a gay pop star was such a phenomena. And, that could have potentially been a career-ending scandal for him, but he turned it all around. In that same year, he released that lovely track, Outside, which was actually set in a men's toilet, and he was dressed as a police officer. So that was him actually tackling cancel culture, and that was a kind of defining moment for gay liberation and owning it. So this is what this two-part documentary is going to look at, how he actually, turned it around. Because, at the time, there was so much media and moral outrage about what had happened to George Michael then. But now, if you think about it 25 years later, it's a totally different story. But I think it's quite interesting that there's still a lot of celebrities and artists and sports people who still don't feel comfortable to come out with their sexuality. So, having a moment like this for George Michael really leads the way.
I remember growing up, one of my best friends at school, her mum had a huge crush on George Michael before he came out. And I think in those days, late 80s, early 90s, whether it was the artists themselves or whether it was the record labels, were afraid that by coming out you would alienate your market in many ways.
Totally, because it was all about the female fan base. So, they thought if you get this superstar, and George Michael was beautiful, having a superstar like him come out and say he's gay, you think, oh, that's going to affect the record sales, it's going to affect the fan base and people who are interested in him. So that's why he was always coy about his sexuality.
And are you saying it didn't affect those sales?
I don't think it didn't affect the sales, because look, he was a superstar. When he died, there was just so much mourning for him because he had such an iconic voice. Eamonn, if you think of all the tracks he's come out with, there's never going to be another George Michael in that sense. And beyond the music, what this two-part documentary is going to explore as well is the amount of charity work he did. He was very humble. He donated a lot of his royalties to, charities such as Macmillan's, and myself, where my mum, she used to be a nurse at Mary Curie, where his mum unfortunately passed away. He donated so much money to them, gave them tickets to his concerts as well. So it's not only just about him being a gay icon, but it's just a man who didn't want to chase the limelight with all his good efforts as well.
Yeah.
Just a chance to go down memory lane as well.
It is.
Absolutely amazing tracks.
He did. He was really a one-off, definitely. And as I said, it's quite interesting when you look at the landscape now and how the media still want to scrutinise people about what they do behind closed doors. But luckily, you know, the press, we have to adhere to laws now, where back then it was a bit of a free-for-all.
One of the things he did behind closed doors was watch daytime TV.
Oh.
And he phoned into This Morning.
Yeah.
One day, live.
As George Michael.
Yeah, George Michael, and he, you know, he was a regular viewer, and that was his thing, and he took part in a number of discussions and debates. Yeah. So
what were the topics that get him on the blower?
Can't remember, but it was he was there. And, wherever. That was it. So
he
was that normal, very normal, ordinary side to him being a superstar.
I know.
Because he was. I mean, there's some people that we look at and people talk about stars and this and that, but George Michael was a superstar.
Yeah, and he was very humble with it as well. I think, you know, when you see him from the Wham days and stuff like that, he, other than this toilet scandal, he kept his career pretty much intact and out of controversy. But it was always that big question about his sexuality, which the media couldn't seem to chase.
Was he ever associated with girlfriends? Did the agents?
I think he was. At the beginning, he was associated. Around that time of the last Christmas, when he came out with that video, I think he was associated with a woman that he was seeing. But other than that, that's why people were so interested, because he didn't get married and he wasn't out there like the typical male pop stars with this bevy of ladies.
Yeah, well, he got 3 Brit Awards, Best British Male twice, 4 MTV Video Music Awards, 4 Ivor Novello Awards, 3 American Music Awards, 2 Grammys.
Get the idea. Get the idea.
Oh,
I went to see him at Wembley.
I went to go see him in Wembley in 2007, and it was the best concert ever. He filled the whole stadium, and that voice, you know, these days, Eamonn's, like a lot of these pop stars, their voices are too manufactured, and I love, like, artists such as George Michael because it's just authentic.
You've got to have faith, Stephanie.
Always.
Thank you very much indeed. Stephanie Tetchy there on George Michael. So it's called?
It's called George Michael Outed, and it's going to be on Channel 4, 9 p.m. tonight and tomorrow.
Thank you very much indeed. Be watching that. Thank you. Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll have more for you on Suella Braverman's new detain and deport immigration plan. But first, here's your forecast with Greg Dewhurst.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. The week ahead, well, it's looking cold for many of us. We will see some snow, particularly in the north, but quite widely frost and ice. So looking at the bigger picture, and we have northerly winds being introduced from the Arctic right across the UK, so it will feel cold over the next few days with the risk of snow in places too. This morning, it is a chilly start across many areas. There's quite a lot of clouds, some showery outbreaks of rain across England and Wales. Sunny spells elsewhere, but already snow showers moving in across parts of Scotland. Met Office warning for snow and ice, so some tricky travelling conditions over the next few days here. Cold feeling afternoon, particularly across the northern half of the UK here. Temperatures really struggling at 2 to 5 Celsius. Further south, 7 to 9, perhaps 10 in the far south of England initially, but even here temperatures will start slipping away later on into the evening time. Under the clearer skies, temperatures quickly falling below freezing this evening. Further snow showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland and northeast England too. The risk of some patchy rain and snow also moving into southern parts of Wales, southern England, but there's a bit of uncertainty with this, as do stay tuned to the forecast, but temperatures widely below freezing, so some icy stretches to take us into Tuesday morning. Early rain and snow across southern counties should start to push away. Elsewhere, cold, a sunny, frosty, icy start to the day. Further snow showers through Tuesday across northern Scotland into Northern Ireland and northeast England, but plenty of sunny spells too. And with that northerly wind, it will be a cold feeling day for everyone, 2 to 5 Celsius generally for many. Over the next few days, it does stay very chilly. We will continue to see the risk of snow, particularly across northern and eastern parts of the UK. There are signs as we get to Friday, it will just start to turn a little bit less cold as weather systems start to move in from the Atlantic. I'll see you again soon.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Detain, deport, ban. The government prepares a new crackdown on small boat crossings.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock on this Monday, the 6th of March. This is Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Asylum seekers who cross the channel in small boats will be removed from the country and banned from returning under new plans to be announced by the Home Secretary. The scheme could see thousands sent to Rwanda and will reportedly cost £3 billion a year.
Ambulance strikes due to take place today have been called off as the Unite Union enters pay talks with the government. It comes after the Unison and GMB unions also put walkouts on hold, following what they called a huge shift in the government's position.
The country's most notorious prisoner, Charles Bronson, will launch a bid for freedom at a hearing today. The Parole Board review will make Bronson the second inmate in British legal history to have his case heard in public.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have been invited to the King's coronation. A spokesperson said Harry and Meghan received correspondence from the King, but the statement did not disclose whether or not they would attend.
And we'd love to hear from you. You know how to do that. You can do it by Twitter or email gbnews@gbnews.uk. And don't forget to let us know where you're watching or listening from.
Yeah, a lot of you have a lot to say on our big story today about migrant crossings across the channel. And, sorry, who's just given me a page about Man United results? That's not even funny. It's not even funny.
Sandra says we have to speculate to accumulate, and it costs us right now. It will save us financially in the future and save our NHS and country. Ben in Dover says, I'm in the Dover front line. Has anyone considered they will try to come in via other ways, like different shores, ferries, lorries? Is this really helping to keep them safe?
Anne says people coming across in small boats have come from a safe country, usually France, sometimes Belgium, after having travelled through many other safe countries such as Germany, Italy, Eastern European countries. Why didn't they ask for asylum there? Okay. The thing is, though, that we think our asylum problem is bad, but hugely greater problems in Germany and France, for instance, than there is in the UK.
So it is our top story this morning. The government is to announce a fresh crackdown on illegal migration, with asylum seekers who enter the UK via small boats facing immediate removal and a lifetime ban.
The £3 billion plan could see thousands sent to Rwanda and other countries using a so-called human rights break to stop lawyers from interfering with deportation flights.
Well, earlier we spoke to an immigration lawyer, Skylar McKeith, who told us the government will face challenges to implement this proposal.
The government absolutely needs to implement a new strategy, but it will definitely be fought. If this proposal is accurate, it may be faced with backlash, potential legal challenges, as asylum claims would essentially automatically be void if the individuals arrived by boat. Also, individuals must not be left in limbo while waiting for third countries to agree to admit them. So we could potentially see issues here with UK arrivees being left in limbo, waiting for safe third countries to admit them. It's a positive step forward on the Prime Minister's part. He's committed to clearing the initial asylum decision backlog, but it's potentially going to be very problematic because it may very well be incompatible with international laws.
Well, joining us now is the former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Good morning again to you.
Good morning.
Ben. Look, it could be fraught with problems, but a positive step forward, says Scott.
Well, I mean, you said it in the earlier segment of the programme, I think, Isabel, that this is mostly window dressing by the Prime Minister, playing the 24-hour news cycle, saying things that he knows his base are going to like. But as Skylar said, that, you know, to deal with this through new legislation is going to be incredibly fraught. To deny people the right to make an application for asylum, which is an essential human right, would require us either to disapply the European Convention of Human... Well, not either. It would require us to disapply the European Convention of Human Rights. And we, as a first world country, as a signatory, as one of the first signatories to that convention, as a signatory to the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, which requires the United Kingdom to adhere to the ECHR, as a signatory to the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the European Union, we simply can't deviate away from it.
Well, I'm going to pick that point up straight away with the government, Ben. Stay where you are. We've got a minister on the line and we will return to you shortly. We're joined now by the Secretary for Science, Innovation and Technology, Michelle Donlan. Good morning to you. I'm not sure if you were able to hear much of that discussion then, but the point was being made. How can you impose a human rights break, a pause on human rights? That's going to go down incredibly badly.
Well, what was being said is simply not true. We'll come forward with legislation this week, which will be still compliant with the ECHR. But the point is that if you look at the dramatic increase of people crossing the channel to come here illegally, the figures are absolutely staggering. Just a few years ago, the figures were around the 300 mark. Now we're looking at 45,000 people last year coming here illegally. That cannot be right. Think about the pressure that is putting on our country. We are talking about people that have travelled here illegally. And the principle of the legislation that we're putting forward is that they should be able to stay if they've come here illegally. I think that's common sense.
But, I mean, just to point out, that's under Conservative administration that those numbers have gone up significantly. I mean, if you're saying that what was being said earlier was wrong on human rights, can you explain how a human rights break would work? Because I think that's the terminology that is alarming to a lot of people who would say, you can't just switch human rights on and off, can you?
No, and I think there's been a lot of speculation before the bill's actually been published. That will be forthcoming in the coming days. It will come to Parliament and people will be able to scrutinise that in detail. But what I can tell you is the basic principle is if you come here illegally, you shouldn't be able to stay. We're all in favour of people trying to gain asylum legally. We're talking about a process which is propped up by criminal gangs that exploit desperate people and also people that have crossed many different countries to get here, many safe countries. It cannot be right that we continue to let that happen. That's why the Prime Minister made it one of his top 5 priorities to stop the boats. It's why he's consistently acted on this since he entered office, and it's why he's bringing forward a legislation to tackle this problem.
Well, why is it then that the previous Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is saying that the legislation is actually already in place for exactly what the Prime Minister is aiming to achieve? It just hasn't been applied properly. And a lot of people would say this is just window dressing. This is about politics, not actually probably going to proceed through the courts because of all the reasons that we've already outlined. This is about playing to the Conservative Party base, which might work for an election, but it's not going to help reduce those numbers.
Well, I'd say that's not true. We've made a pledge to stop those boats and show tangible action. When I go out knocking on doors, not just in my constituency, but in other constituencies too, one of the key issues that comes up is is the fact that people want some change on this issue. They are fed up with the rhetoric. That's why this government is acting. That's why it was one of the top 5 priorities from this Prime Minister. That's why legislation is coming forward. And it's why he's taken other actions. It's why we got that record deal with the French government on boats last year. But it's important that we continue to act and take measures that will address the problem.
Secretary of State, that's what's going on now, but we want to look ahead to the future. And you're here to announce and to tell us about the government's ambitions for Britain to be a science and technology superpower. How do you plan to go about that?
It's a good question, Eamonn. So this is a government that isn't just tackling the problems of today, but also the problems of tomorrow. And the way that we can do that is by turbocharging our science and technology sectors so that we can create more jobs, that we can boost growth, we can improve people's lives, things like healthcare, cleaner, greener transport. All of these things are only possible if we really accelerate our science and technology industries. That's why we published a strategic framework today, which includes 10 top areas that we're going to then have individual action plans on, working towards becoming a science and technology superpower by 2030. This is an ambitious government, but we haven't just set out a framework. We've also acted today with investment, £370 million of new money, including new money into core technologies. And these key technologies will help provide additional jobs, higher paid jobs, and like I say, better healthcare, and real tangible changes to people's lives.
You mentioned better healthcare there a couple of times. What do you have in mind there?
So I think if we look at one of the key technologies, like AI, for example, that has a real ability to transform healthcare, to get to a position where we're predicting diseases and illnesses in people before they've even materialized. And that's why it's important that we're leading the way in things like AI. We're currently 3rd in the world. And we want the jobs to be located here. We want the innovation to be happening here. We want to be at that frontier so that we can push through those barriers. It is science and technology that will be eradicating certain diseases, that will be enabling things like the production of organs, for instance, that without using human tissue. All of these things are only possible by innovation, science and technology. And this is a government that is investing, but also planning for the future and setting out a framework so that we can be strategic, not just in my department, but across the entirety of government.
And of course, last week with the Windsor framework being announced, the return into the Horizon programme being broadly welcomed in the science community in this country. I just wonder, how frustrating is the intervention from Boris Johnson? Not only that he won't support this Windsor framework, but also just the return to discussions about Partygate, seeing that on 4 occasions that he may have knowingly misled Parliament. How much of a thorn is Boris Johnson in Rishi Sunak and indeed the government's side?
I think what matters to people at the moment is the government delivering for them. The Prime Minister set out 5 key pledges, including halving inflation, growing the economy, and these are the things that are coming up. We've already spoken about stopping the boats. We've alluded to cutting waiting lists, and obviously getting that debt down. These are the things that come up time and time again by my constituents. And I think that what is really important is a government delivering. And what happened with this last week was obviously showcasing that this is a government that can tackle problems that commentators might have said were impossible to deal with, and the job.
We just lost the last couple of words there, but I just want to ask you as well, we've got to continue to talk about Matt Hancock. Evidence being published in the Telegraph today that he apparently didn't want to follow the science, as the government was claiming during the pandemic, because he didn't want people to see that it would be implied that we'd been getting it wrong. People won't have any faith in the government after this, will they?
Well, I think it's important to remember that these are private WhatsApp messages. They are discussions by Matt Hancock. They're not discussions by the government as a whole. That's not the process in which decisions were taken. And I know that firsthand because I was working as Universities Minister at the time, and I attended sub-cabinet committees where decisions were taken. And there was rigorous discussion, and there was evidence given based on the science. certainly the decision-making process did not boil down to what's up. We're seeing a snapshot of certain comments from an individual to other people that are taken out of context. I think it's really important as well to wait for that inquiry, that independent inquiry into COVID, where we can really see, what happened, what could have happened better, what lessons can we learn.
OK, well, people will judge for themselves on that. Yes, thank you.
Secretary of State, really appreciate that, and good luck with your plans to turn us into a technological superpower. Keep us posted.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Ben, you were itching to come in during that.
Well, on virtually every single point she made. I mean, she spoke the government agenda extremely convincingly, but actually she talks about pulling a brake on asylum applications. You can't do that if we're in the European Court of Human Rights, the Convention. She didn't explain how the government was going to do that. She talked about making this country into a science technology superstar, and she talked about the £360 million that the government's committed to investment, but she didn't address the £250 million tax breaks that they're withdrawing in the next budget from IT and AI companies. We had AstraZeneca just a few weeks ago deciding not to invest in the UK, going to the Republic of Ireland because of the tax rates. This government has doubled, it has set a rate that's double the Republic's corporation tax rate in Northern Ireland, 25% corporation tax rate versus the Republic's 12.5%. It's increased tax on dividends. It's increased tax on capital gains. It's increased tax on employees. What incentive have AI businesses got to come to the United Kingdom? I'm afraid Michelle was virtually wrong on everything she said. And it's no good, the government sitting there banging the drum saying we're going to deliver, science technology revolution. We're going to sort out the problems in Northern Ireland with the Windsor framework, which, by the way, doesn't work. We haven't touched on it. But all of that is smoke and mirrors. The whole thing about this new legislation on stopping boats is smoke and mirrors. They're playing the news cycle. The great thing, as we discussed in the earlier segment, Isabel, about stopping boats, is that no amount of rhetoric is going to get over the headlines that are going to come forth in the next few weeks, irrespective of this new legislation.
Ben, got to leave it there. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it. Thank you. 7:15 is the time. Today, the so-called most notorious prisoner in Britain, Charles Bronson, will appear before a parole board as he attempts to win his freedom after nearly 50 years behind bars.
So the inmate, now known as Charles Salvador, has been in prison for nearly, as Eamonn says, 50 years following several violent incidents whilst behind bars.
Well, earlier on we spoke to a former lawyer for Bronson who told us he hoped progress would be made within the system.
If you really strip it all down and look at this case, he hasn't been convicted of murder. He's never raped anyone. He's never offended against children. And it begs the question, is he really Britain's most notorious prisoner when we consider that within our system we have the killers of Lee Rigby, Levi Belfield, and Ian Huntley, to name but a few? Can we really say that someone convicted of Charlie's crimes is in fact the most notorious prisoner?
Charles Bronson, Charles Salvador, whatever his name is now, whatever he takes, we're talking about his parole today, and it is going to be held in the public eye.
Yeah, for the first, I think it's the second time that's happened in the history of parole hearings. And we're going to speak now to somebody who knows not only exactly what it's like to spend a lifetime in prison, but also knows Charles Bronson as well. This is Britain's longest-serving prisoner, John Massey, who I hear has just fallen off the line, which is a shame. We will have him back in a second, but I can tell you a bit about him because he spent time in jail for shooting somebody after his friend was bottled. So he was convicted of murder. He spent time in Franklin Prison in Durham, where he got to know Charles Bronson, and hopefully in a minute or two he'll be able to tell us himself exactly what kind of fellow inmate was, because apparently that he was quite sort of quiet and reserved in the early years. And once he found his confidence inside the prison system, he then became a bit wayward, which then got him in a lot of trouble. But it'd be interesting to hear firsthand from John Massey a little bit about what
But in the meantime, we're going to hear from Paul Kohler.
Okay.
Paul was a victim of a terrible attack while in his own home, but he's since met the offender and he's forgiven him through a restorative justice process. Very good to see you, Paul.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning.
And I suppose the whole reason why we're talking is to what level our forgiveness goes you went a long way. Salvador, Bronson, whatever you want to call him, he did his crime, he served his time. He didn't get on with a lot of prison guards inside jail and whatever. You may argue that jail might not be the right place for him. But immediately I think a lot of people, he's created this infamy, which may be actually a bigger threat than he actually is. Where do you stand on all of this?
Well, people can change. Whether he's changed or not, I don't know. I haven't seen the evidence, but we will see in the parole board. It's a very, very, very rigorous process, so robust. And he's got to show he's no longer a threat to society, a significant threat to society.
And I suppose you demonstrate, don't you, the cost of what crimes can do to people on a human level. You had the most dreadful intrusion into your home. Your 4 daughters were in the house at the time, your wife as well. Were you physically assaulted? Tell us a little bit about what happened and why you felt it necessary to meet your attacker.
Yes, I was physically assaulted. I wanted to find out why he had done it, or they had done it, and so I wanted to meet them. And forgiving gives you power. It gives you control of the process.
You see, Paul, I remember your case so well. I lived quite nearby where your home was, and this terrible beating that you took. I mean, it was. I don't know. Do we have that picture? Do we not? No. And really, it was absolutely horrendous. Why this meeting the attackers? What did it do for you? You said it was empowering for you.
It allowed me to look him straight in the face. The last time I'd seen him, I was lying on my back with him beating down on me. Suddenly, I was looking him in the eye, and we were equals at that point. And me forgiving, which I didn't have to do, but I felt the desire to, gave me control, empowered me. So it's quite a selfish act, forgiving. Actually, it's not purely altruistic like it sounds.
But I'm interested. Did you feel like he was the sort of person that understood what he had done? I mean, when we're sort of relating it to the Charles Bronson case, he doesn't seem a reformed character. He doesn't seem open to change. And I wonder if your attacker welcomed you coming in, or if that was partly he wanted to try and control it in some way. I mean, how did you find him when you met him, and what was the impact on you and your daughters?
He was apologetic. The whole point of the process, the 2-hour interview, was trying to test whether that was authentic. And so what are you going to do with your life? How are you going to change? We were quizzing him about those questions. And in the end, I decided, yes, you are authentic. Yes, I will accept your apology. And yes, I will forgive you on that.
Yeah. John Massey, the attack on Paul, the attack on Paul was 7 years ago, wasn't it?
9 years ago.
9 years ago. Google his name and you'll see those pictures of how badly he was beaten up. We have got John Massey here. John, we're talking. None of us have met Charles Bronson, Charles Salvador. You have, my friend. How would you? And you both met in prison. How would you describe him?
Well, I first met him in Franklin Top Security Prison in Durham. And he was just young and a bit green at the time. We kind of took him under our wing and showed him the ropes. And I don't want to say anything detrimental about him, because I don't want to be instrumental in damaging his chances of parole. But he's not exactly helped his own case, has he?
No, I agree with you. And, all this name changing and all this sort of thing. But could it be argued that prison, maybe, John, is not the place for him?
I don't think that's a question for me to answer. Right. What you talking in terms of psychiatry? I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
he's already been to Broadmoor. He's been released. He's back into the normal system. So presumably he's been cleared of that.
I mean, John, you were convicted of murder and spent a great deal of time in prison. What is it like reintroducing yourself into society after that? And how much harder will it be for someone like Charles Bronson, who never committed anything like a murder, but has spent so much of his sentence in solitary confinement, to then potentially be back in society?
Yeah, solitary confinement is not good for the mind, for the head. it can damage you severely. But he's I think, to all intents and purposes, he has a strong mind, and he seems to have stood up to it quite well. And he's used physical fitness as a tool to keep sane, basically.
Yeah. You see, John, if you look at your situation compared to Charles's situation, he's been in prison longer than you, yet he didn't murder anyone.
I've been out 5 years now, so
yeah,
I spent 43 years in prison.
Yeah.
And I thought, like most people, would be easy coming back into society, but I've found that it's not so easy. Things crop up and catch you by surprise. I'm still coping, but I think I'm coping quite well at the moment.
John, let me ask you, I mean, Paul in studio here, he eventually forgave his attackers. Your situation was that you shot a bouncer and that man died. I mean, you have your defense as to why you did that. Did you need, or do you need, forgiveness for what you did?
I don't think I'd ever get it, personally. I mean, for the most part, general public, yeah. But for the family who are concerned, I don't think I'd ever gain forgiveness now.
But would it help? Would it help you? Would it be something that would ease your passage in life if that family forgave you the way Paul did?
For sure, it would always be beneficial for everything to be laid to rest. But I don't think it'd ever happen.
Okay, listen.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you one last question, if that's all right. We've heard that Bronson's mother's wish is to see him freed again. You can understand any mother wants her son back. How much did it mean to your family to get you out from behind bars?
A hell of a lot. My mother visited me all over the country for over 40 years. And when she became ill with a brain hemorrhage and incapable of visiting me anymore, I tried my hardest to get the authorities to allow me to visit her. And they just point blank refused, said I was too high a security risk. And in the end, I escaped from Pentonville and I managed to get to see her. Wow. But that cost me dearly. But then again, it's something they can never take away from me. I got to see my mother before she died.
Okay, John, thanks for your story. Continue to lead a good life. Stay out of trouble. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. And Paul, you could hear from John there how important forgiveness would be to him.
Yeah, indeed. And I'm sure it does hurt the perpetrator, but it's not about that. It's about the victim. It really is. It's if the victim is willing, or the victim's family, and no one should be made to feel they should forgive. It's up to them. It absolutely must be victim-centred.
As regards Bronson today and his public parole, it's probably something you'll be watching. Do you think we have much to fear from him?
Again, I don't know. I don't know the evidence. That will be examined in the parole hearing. And what I'd say to anyone, watch it. It's such a robust process. This idea that parole is easy, it's not. The parole board are very rigorous in their approach, and you will see that if you watch it. So I say to everyone, try and watch it. It's so important.
Sometimes, though, does it not?
All things do.
Yeah.
All things do.
OK, Paul Collar, really interesting to talk to you.
Thank you. The time, 27 minutes past 7.
Kinsey Schofield will be here in just a moment talking all things Prince Harry and Meghan. Lots of talk about whether or not they will be going to the coronation.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the people's channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the people's channel.
Welcome back. 7:31 still to come on the show this morning.
With Mother's Day fast approaching, well, we say it's 2 weeks away, right? At 7:45, Kate Hardcastle will be here telling you about some locally made gifts that will be perfect to solve your present dilemma.
At 8:10, as Charles Bronson takes part in a public parole hearing, we'll be asking his son, George, about helping his father's fight for freedom.
And you can join in any of the discussions as you've been doing throughout today. There will be a filter on anything to do with football with the words Liverpool or Manchester United in it. They will not be read out. They go into a special just machine that crunches them up and spits them out.
So really trying to read them out.
I mean, if it was up to me, yeah, we could, but just can't do technical fault.
Lots of you getting in touch in Harry and Meghan, which we're about to talk about, but just to give you a couple of them. Nigel in Weymouth, we couldn't care less if they're invited or if they attend. And Andy says, tell him to stop considering if he's coming to the ceremony. Just say the invitation's withdrawn from the little whinging wimp.
And I think that's what most of you do think. You know, what are they holding out for? What are they holding out for?
An apology. That's what they want.
So they get the apology and then they come to the coronation. So that's a lose-lose situation. really, all round. Nobody wants them at the coronation, and nobody wants them to have an apology.
The king wants them there. It's his son.
No, he sort of, it's expected of him. That, you know, I was thinking, I don't know what way people talk, but you'd be getting on the phone and you'd be saying, listen, son, it's like this, right? You can come, but keep her out of it.
You can't do that with Harry. It all ends up in a book or in a therapy session for
Bye,
95
Harry.
minutes.
Bye-bye, bye-bye. Keep your comments coming in, except football. So, more on all of this. Let's talk about this, the coronation and what's happening with Harry and Meghan. Will they come, will they not come? Kinsey Schofield in Los Angeles for us this morning. So, Kinsey, it's make your mind up time for Harry and Meghan.
Eamonn, I cannot believe you suggested that the king call Harry and say, leave the lady at home. You are cruising for a bruise in Eamonn Holmes.
Why? She's completely toxic. Why would you bring her? There's more likely to be acceptance of him. What?
I mean, what I will say is that there is a clear line. There is a clear line on the map of when the problem started. And that's when the wife entered the picture. However, this is King Charles's biggest day. He's waited all of his life for this day. He wants his son to be there, and he wants his son to be comfortable. And as we've seen, Harry is pretty uncomfortable in public situations, so I'm sure he would like his wife to be there. But palace sources, they say that Harry could show up by himself without Meghan. It's Archie's birthday. I know you're familiar with the chaos that has been going on here in the States over the last few weeks. The reception to Spare has not been positive. They've become a punchline on every late night program. South Park absolutely destroyed them. It was basically a documentary, watching the Worldwide Privacy Tour episode. And, Meghan has not appreciated the negative attention. So I think that rejection is one of her greatest insecurities. She doesn't want to go over there and be booed and torn to shreds. Could Harry show up alone? Absolutely. But I think if we were betting people, we would assume that there would be a Sussex presence, because the closer they are to the family, the more they can commercialize it in the States. That's really important to them.
Kinsey, in fairness to Eamonn, there is precedent for the whole you're welcome but wifey isn't. Because remember, of course, when the Queen was in her dying moments, or perhaps she'd already died, Meghan was alongside Harry planning to head up to Balmoral, and they told her, no, thank you.
Well, absolutely. And I don't know if you remember this. I know you have Tom Bower on later. I love him. Tom Bower says in his book that the Queen said, thank goodness that Meghan didn't attend Prince Philip's funeral. So, I mean, you do make a great point. It makes me nervous, Eamonn. I don't want people coming after you.
Yeah.
I doubt that'll happen. Well, there's only the usual people who do that, her little army that she has that phone in and complain. But I think generally on behalf of the great British public, I think I speak on behalf of them. I would like to think so. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look at the comments on Twitter already this morning about our conversation earlier today. The majority of people don't want Harry and Meghan to show up. They feel like they're a distraction and that they've been very destructive towards the royal family. I mean, I would rather them not show up. I agree. But, if King Charles wants them there, I respect his wishes, because I know this is a very important day for him.
Do we really believe King Charles wants them there?
I do, but you know what I'm like.
No, yeah, but he's being told, well, you better, because the optics are not good, you better invite him anyway.
Well, to be fair, he did evict, we're led to believe, his son and daughter-in-law from Frogmore Cottage the day after the book came out because of comments made about beloved Camilla. So maybe he has crossed a line, and maybe the king privately is fed up. Who knows? My theory is that there'll be coronation chickens, and they might decide it's just not worth the stress, and they just won't come.
Yeah. Okay. We'll
Oh,
go for that.
wow.
Wow.
I don't know. I feel like their relationship is too, they've got to monetize that relationship. What's left? They've been talking about like 17 months for the last 3 years. They've got to get some new content for the next Netflix show, for the next book. I mean, they're running out of content. They're running out of stories to tell. Harry can only talk about his bruised childhood for so long. I'm sorry you didn't get hugged every once in a while, but there's literally photographic evidence that proves that that's not true. They've got to come up with some new stories, and their victimhood has become a very lucrative business for them. They need people to turn on them, to make them feel rejected.
Okay. Well, thanks for your analysis, Kinsey. As always, really appreciate it. We say goodbye to you for this morning, and we look forward to 8:45 this morning. We're going to have more on this whole subject with the royal author, Tom Bauer, and he really has got a thing or two or three to say. Coming up.
Oh, sorry, coming up, I thought that was the throw to the break. Coming up, are you sitting in pain waiting for a dentist appointment? You are not alone if you are. We will be discussing the dental crisis when we go through the papers with Biggins and Anna Mikhailova.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Joining us to go through the papers in more details this morning, actor Christopher Biggins and Deputy Political Editor at the Mail on Sunday, Anna Mikhailova. The very thing. Thank you very much indeed. Good seeing you both. Anna, we're going to begin with you, the son and the founder of the Dyson empire. has had something to say about tax.
Yes, so James Dyson's put the Chancellor on notice. He says that he absolutely must not go through with the big corporation tax rise. So to brief everyone, it's corporation tax is about to go up from 19% to 25%. And this is going to be a massive dividing line in the budget coming up. So there's a lot of pressure already on Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt to scrap this. James Dyson is saying that if they go through with this, it'll make the UK less competitive, drive businesses away. And really, it's piling on pressure.
The only thing I'm going to say about that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Mr. Dyson not move his manufacturing plant to Turkey or something?
It's a slight downside to this whole thing. I think a lot of people will agree with what he's saying, and business leaders in particular. But Dyson himself moved his business HQ to Singapore, but crucially also said it was nothing to do with tax. So
cheap labour. But, I mean, what's the defence? I mean, the mood music that we're getting from the Treasury, and they're so close, aren't they, Hunt and Sunak, is that they are unmoved by these appeals. This is going to happen whether we like it or not.
The defence generally on corporation tax is that there isn't much evidence that lowering it in the modern world actually does bring in investment.
Ireland would argue differently on that.
I think they'd have to lower it a lot to make a significant impact, is the point. But I think what we're really seeing here is Jeremy Hunt is so worried about repeating the Liz Truss Kwasi-Kwarteng budget that he's almost possibly going to go too far. So he just doesn't want to be linked with any tax cuts because he doesn't want to look irresponsible, doesn't want to spook the markets, which would be a big mistake because, you know, there's a difference between being sensible, taking everyone with, you know, not making the mistakes of before without being too heavy-handed and increasing the tax burden even more.
Now, we've got a story here, front page of the Mirror, and Isabel, you can grab that big headline, is 11 million suffer in NHS dentist crisis here. Now, we could put in midwives for that one. We could put in so many aspects of the National Health Service that if you're relying on getting that sort of help, you're going to fall short on this one. Tell us more.
Well, it's rather terrifying, this story. I mean, you know, I've got page 5 of the Mirror, and it says kicked in the teeth, which I think all people are, because, you know, teeth is a very... I had toothache last week, and luckily I rang my dentist, and I was seen the following day, so I was lucky. But, you know, a lot of people...
Was your dentist private dentist?
No, it's National Health.
National Health, right.
And they're
but you're an actor, you see, so you could probably have acted a very good I'm in great pain. And
well, I did, yes, you're right, yes, and I cried a lot. No, I didn't. I mean, I think, you know, it's just the luck of the draw. I really do. And a lot of people, though, you know, we hear terrible stories of doing their own dentistry. You know, going in with a hammer and claws and things. I mean, just terrifying what they're doing, and ruining their whole teeth situation. I mean, it's a ridiculous scenario, and you're quite rightly said. There's a lot of other people in the National Health, a lot of other professions, you know, which are suffering.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I know what the answer is. The answer is surely to have an indenture to, which has nothing to do with your mouth, but you know, pay for dentists to go through university and say the payback is that you spend 7 years in the National Health Service or else you have to buy your way out of it.
The only problem with that is then the National Health Service is just full of brand newly qualified dentists, when actually you want often the more experienced ones dealing with those tricky cases. Private healthcare is quite often just filled with cosmetic and less serious stuff, but as so often the case, the NHS stuff is often the more challenging. Do you want them fresh out of medical school? I mean, what's the answer to this or dentistry school?
I don't know what the answer is, but I would just add that we've got a story today that you get jobs if you have a winning smile, apparently. You're more likely. So it's as well as being extremely painful not to have a working NHS dentistry, it's also bad for the economy. So it needs to be fixed urgently.
I mean, there's nothing like... It's a terrible pain. I know lots of other ailments are painful, but this is, you know, somehow it really affects the whole of your brain.
It sends you absolutely mad. Anna, what's the story at front of the Times? Boris Johnson's nominated another member of his family for a peerage.
He has. So the Times says that Boris Johnson has put forward Stanley Johnson, his father, for a knighthood.
Oh, how lovely.
Which is exactly... I think everyone always says they only accept honours for the parents, and this is sort of cutting out the middleman. He's going straight to just handing his father a knighthood.
And he, no matter what way that looks or what we all think about it, he can do that, can he?
Of course he can do it.
Yeah.
Look, I think some people, on the way here, the taxi driver I spoke to was very angry about it. Personally, I can't really get angry about it. I don't really think it's a big deal at all. The original rumour was that he was going to put Stanley Johnson in the Lords. Now, that would have been a thing because that's the legislature, but a knighthood is a ball, and I think...
You're related, though, to Boris, aren't you, Eamonn?
Why? How am I related?
Well, I thought weren't you up for a gong? You know, isn't that through him? You were sort of his.
No, it wasn't anything to do with him. No, in the slightest. No. But I wouldn't mind. I mean, Sir Christopher Biggins sounds quite
very good. It's Eamonn Holmes. What a
has a ring to it. Now, Ken Bruce, whether he gets something or not for all his years on Radio 2.
What is happening to the BBC?
So today's the first day without Ken.
Yes, and he's the last one of a huge lineup. Vanessa Feltz, Craig Charles, Simon Mayo, Steve Wright, Paul O'Grady, all got rid of by the BBC. Radio 2 I love. I really enjoy listening to Radio 2. I listen to it in the car. But I find now, in the evenings especially, they're going for a younger audience. Now, surely that was Radio 1's position. And we want Ken Bruce to be there, you know, in the mornings for us and everything like that. I just think they're not looking at it sensibly, and they're thinking the new audience is a young audience, which I don't think it is. I think the older audience is still there.
Well, there we go. We have to wrap. We've got to say thank you to both of you, and we will do more papers in the next hour. Anna Mikhailova and Christopher Biggins, we'll see you just after half.
I'm just thinking, it's Gary Davis who takes over from Ken Bruce today, and Gary Davis... I can remember when Gary Davis was the hot young thing on Radio 1.
Yeah.
Ooh, Gary Davis.
Ooh, Gary Davis.
Ooh, Gary Davis.
How much younger is he than Ken
radio.
Bruce? How much younger is he than Ken
Probably
Bruce?
about 10 years, I would imagine. I would imagine.
Right,
not a lot in it. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
The time is 7:49.
It's 7:50, actually, Isabel.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Just saying.
Just saying.
OK. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The Refugee Council's warning that thousands of asylum seekers will be left permanently in limbo as a result of proposed small boat legislation set to be announced tomorrow. The organisation says government plans could effectively shatter the UK's commitments under the UN Refugee Convention to give people a fair hearing, regardless of their route into the country.
Notorious prisoner Charles Bronson will make another bid to get out of jail this week in a public parole hearing, which will happen later today. He's been behind bars for most of the last 50 years for crimes such as hostage-taking and armed robbery. He says he wants to be released to enjoy what's left of his life.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have received an official invitation to King Charles's coronation. They've been in email correspondence with the King's office over whether or not they'll be attending.
This next item is very good because, gosh, I have got in February and March so many things to deal with in terms of birthdays.
Yes.
And then you've got Mother's Day coming up as well. And the thing is, don't panic. Now, you're 2 weeks away, and I think that's quite good because then you can have time to think
and prepare. Plan. And who better to do that than our consumer and retail expert, Kate Hardcastle, who's been scouring the internet to find some locally made gifts and joins us in the studio with her results of all of that research. And this is about trying to do meaningful gifts to mothers, as well as good for local economies.
Yeah, well, good morning, both. And it's the brief this time. If you remember, on Valentine's Day, we did Cheap and Cheerful. We thought we would, for the mums that seemingly have everything. They say they don't want anything, but that is a lie. They do. We thought we'd go for locally sourced, organically grown and good for the environment. So not much of a challenging brief, but we have something that's not in studio that I want to show you first, which is a beautiful handmade necklace by a local independent independent store, but they do sell online. This has got love written around it, which is just beautiful. That's £25. That's handmade by Tinny. You can see they can get that from the website. Plenty of time to be able to organise that. And it comes beautifully wrapped as well. So that's supporting a local artisan. We know, though, a lot of these stores, so I do encourage you to visit independents near you, don't have that big national reach, but have a look, see the farm stores, see your local independent, see what you might buy. But these are some ideas that might exist. A local honey, this one's from Daylesford.
Oh,
this has got some ginger and turmeric in it now. Don't just spread it on your toast, you can pop it in your teas, it's recipes, it's beautifully infused, $7.99, locally grown. And look at the canister that it comes in as well, that glass canister. You can reuse that, be able to pop that into
This is
the
like
kitchen.
watching QVC, so
yeah,
it is.
it's so
You
sweet. Have you
model
smelt
that
it?
very
though?
well, Isabel.
Crack it open and get a
Really?
smell. Yeah, smell-o-vision.
Okay, I will.
And Eamonn,
Yes?
do you like a scented candle?
I do like a scented candle, I have to say.
But-
I particularly like lemon, and
Lemon?
oranges, yeah.
Have you tried a vine tomato yet? This is the scent that seems to be very popular with the Celebratory.
Do you know what? This one's like good enough to eat.
Oh, it's good. It's good. Now, that's a bit pricey. That's an organic candle. It's 16 for that, but you can make it last longer. If it is a natural candle, just here's a tip.
Sorry.
It's all right. You burn the top first before the wick, so that it burns then evenly, and you'll get a lot
How do you burn
long.
the top
So you
before
put
the
some
wick?
heat to get all of the wax around the top melted.
Is that how you do it?
Before you burn the wick, and it'll last a lot longer because it'll burn down evenly then.
Oh, we have this constant fight in our house about how to make the wick burn evenly. It's very...
We'll try that. If it's an organic one, I'm told.
So how do you, over a hob or something, to warm it across?
I would kind of take one of those
Get a
bigger
lighter
flame
or-
lighter, and do the top of it.
tip.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So that should make it last a lot longer.
Not sure I'm into that smell.
Do you really?
To describe it, you know how when you eat a tomato, sometimes it smells of the vine. It smells of the vine rather than the tomato.
I understand.
Do you know what I mean?
I
That kind of.
understand. I think
But
it's
you
really
see-
fresh and beautiful.
that's
today.
why
It is
I
called
was
vine
thinking,
tomato.
yeah.
There you go.
See, that's
But do you like the smell of the vine? I'm not sure I want it in my candle.
Well, I like the
But I love
the ginger and turmeric honey candle. I think that smells lovely.
No, but that's not a
So
candle.
the
that's actually...
honey was $7.99, and locally grown honeys are
That's
about
legit.
the same.
Just shove on your toast.
Oh, I would have burnt that. That's where I go wrong.
Well, you know, honey and wax, not far off. It all comes from the bee.
Pop
Anyway.
it in the tea, but the 2 points on these, obviously, they're reusable canisters.
Yeah.
Which, are good for the environment as well. You get secondary use out of it. Pop loads of pins, drawing pins, nails, whatever you might be collecting, or put your brushes in, makeup brushes, but reuse those. You can even reseal them with wax yourself if you want. But all of these products you can find in your local farm shops too. It doesn't have to be Daylesford. I did bring a little something pricier that's very British. Derrick Rose, a brand that's over 100 years old, and is a really beautiful British nightwear brand. And the nightwear can be a little bit pricey, but we sometimes buy fragrances for mums, and this is a fragrance that is also a pillow spray. And because you two are always in need of your sleep, I wanted to bring it and see what you thought. I think it's good enough for the home. I think
What
it's
do I
probably
do?
good
Do
enough.
I spray the
Just
air?
spray the aroma around
Ready?
you.
Oh, don't worry.
And
What
then
seems to be blowing that way.
it's a little bit of
Oh,
lavender.
that's
It's not
lovely.
too heavy.
Spray that under your arm.
You stop it.
I think it's good enough for fragrance, isn't
Spray
it?
that in your face.
But that's Derrick Rose, so that lovely brand that's over 100 years old.
Oh, and a
that's-
pretty bag.
You
as
get a
well.
lovely
See,
bag
the
with
mum's
it.
like
yeah.
a bit, the
Exactly.
So you would buy it
paraphernalia.
just for the bag?
Yeah, probably. That'd be
And
useful
of
for
course-
ballet shoes
What
or
have you
whatever
got?
for
Is that a card you've got there just
yeah,
to finish on?
of course, a little recycled paper card, which you can buy now, and some of them you can
What does
even
it
have
say on
fancy-
it?
This is for my mum. Thank you for being my mum. What else can you say? Thanks for putting up with me.
I don't have a mum anymore.
Oh, Eamonn, this is your first Mother's Day.
My first Mother's Day without mum, so I'm an orphan now. So yeah.
Have you heard about the post boxes that are in the graveyards now? A lovely idea. A little girl came up with. They're white post boxes, and they're going to be across all graveyards soon, and you can pop letters to them.
Gosh,
so you
there's
can
Mummy
write letters
there.
to heaven. I think
Goodness
it's a
me.
beautiful idea.
That's so lovely.
Well, do you know what? It came up in my memories on my phone that a message that she sent to me last year for Mother's Day. I might just put it on social media eventually, but I did an interview in it, sort of knowing, it was near the end and whatever, and I talked about how good a mum she was. And so she sent me this message on my brother's phone. She had no idea what she was doing. She had no idea where to look or anything else, but she gave me the message. And she was 94. And that's nice. So I might put that on
This ring's making me
Do
choke
it.
up.
Do it. Whatever helps you through, because grief's a journey.
Yeah, good, guys. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your Mother's Days.
Lovely, Kate. And of course, you're a mummy as well.
I am of 3. Do you think I'll be getting any of this?
Yes. Yes, you will.
Good. Please do stay with us. We'll have more on the government's £3 billion new plan to tackle the small boat crisis.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Detain, deport, ban. The government prepares a new crackdown on small boat crossings.
Good morning. It's 1 minute after 8 o'clock. It's Monday, the 6th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading the news this morning, asylum seekers who cross the channel in small boats will be removed from the country and banned from returning under new plans to be announced by the Home Secretary. The scheme could see thousands sent to Rwanda and it will reportedly cost £3 billion. The Science Secretary Michelle Donnellan told us the current figures demand immediate action.
figures are absolutely staggering. Just a few years ago, the figures were around the 300 mark. Now we're looking at 45,000 people last year coming here illegally. That cannot be right.
Ambulance strikes due to take place today have been called off as the Unite union enters pay talks with the government. It comes after the Unison and GMB unions also put walkouts on hold following what they called a huge shift in the government's position.
The country's most notorious prisoner, Charles Bronson, will launch a bid for freedom at a hearing today. The parole board review will make Bronson the second inmate in British legal history to have his case heard in public.
And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have been invited to the King's coronation. A spokesperson said Harry and Meghan received correspondence from the King, but the statement did not disclose whether or not they'd be attending.
Well, get in touch the usual way. You can get in touch via Twitter. You can email us as well. Let us know where you're watching from as well.
You're just ignoring all the sports ones I can see over your shoulder. Let's read that one. Is it true?
Oh, never mind. Channel migrants. June says, is this another dream that won't come true? More money spent, nothing happens. Philip says, if France and Belgium banned all sales of inflatable boats from on the west coast, the police would then catch the illegal immigrants, delivering them to the coast. There's something in that. Something, you know, is quite simple.
Use boats for other purposes.
Yeah, but
a thing or two to say about not being able to get their hands on a boat. It's very complex. We'll be getting into it. So it is our top story this morning. The government is to announce a fresh crackdown on illegal migration, with asylum seekers who enter the UK via small boats facing immediate removal and a lifetime ban.
The £3 billion plan could see thousands sent to Rwanda and other countries using a so-called human rights break to stop lawyers from interfering with deportation flights.
Earlier, we spoke to Government Minister Michelle Donlan, who said this new proposal does not mean the government closes the door to legal asylum seekers.
I think there's been a lot of speculation before the bill's actually been published. That will be forthcoming in the coming days. It will come to Parliament and people will be able to scrutinise that in detail. But what I can tell you is the basic principle is if you come here illegally, you shouldn't be able to stay. We're all in favour of people trying to gain asylum legally. We're talking about a process which is propped up by criminal gangs that exploit desperate people and also people that have crossed many different countries to get here, many safe countries. It cannot be right that we continue to let that happen.
Well, let's discuss this now with our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Look, everybody can see the problem. The question is whether or not this new bill to be announced tomorrow will go any further than what Priti Patel had already tried to put in place and whether it will make any difference.
Well, there's clear changes in what is being proposed, and we must stress the text of the bill has not been announced. We're expecting that tomorrow. But from what we've been able to gather, this is increasing the ban that currently sits on those who claim illegally asylum and are rejected from a couple of years to a lifetime ban, not being able to ever return to the country, visit, get citizenship. That is a really strong deterrent in the eyes of the government. But also it's about more swiftly dealing with these cases. We know that 45,000 people came to the country illegally last year, but the asylum backlog now stands at 166,000 cases. These are people waiting years to be assessed. So the two parts of this big push for the government is to get these cases heard swiftly, and for those who are rejected, to get them out of the country much, much faster to Rwanda or other safe third countries.
I suppose politically this is a winner for the government because they are being seen to tackle what is on doorsteps, a really big issue. The question is whether or not legally they will be able to affect those changes, because not least a human rights break, I mean, instantly sounds spurious, does it not? You can't switch human rights on and off, can you?
And we know that with regard to what the government has tried to do previously with the Rwanda scheme, not a single flight has left for Rwanda yet. There's been many, many legal challenges, and despite the UK government winning their latest legal battle over the Rwanda scheme, there's still a long, long road to go. And we know that there are many different layers of law, not just domestic, but international law as well, that complicates all of this, the UK government has been clear in its communications over the last few months that in the preparing of this bill, they think they are within international law. But clearly there will be disagreements. And the criticism from the Labour Party this morning is this sounds a lot like what the government has been trying to do before that clearly hasn't worked, as we've seen the numbers coming grow and grow.
Well, the criticism of that isn't just coming from Labour. Priti Patel herself, Suella Braverman's predecessors, has written and spoken over the weekend saying the laws are in place already for what the Prime Minister is proposing.
Although this morning Priti Patel has clarified, shall we say, some of her statements to sort of walk away from the stronger criticism there. But it is clear that friends around Priti Patel were perhaps not best pleased with some of the communication over the weekend. I wonder what conversations have been going on behind closed doors there. But I think the other half of this that is perhaps being underreported is the safe and legal routes that the UK government wants to create as well. This has got to be sort of two different prongs here. Number one, cracking down on the illegality, but number two, making sure that there is a safe and legal way for people, for example, coming from Afghanistan who might have fought for the country in recent years. Currently, many of them are trying to get in illegally. There may well be ways to make sure that there is offshore processing of legal routes to allow for those to not take the illegal route by necessity.
Well, that's key, isn't it? Because at the moment, unless you're travelling from, say, Hong Kong, where you have, I think, 70,000 refugees from the Hong Kong regime into this country, or from Ukraine for obvious reasons, there is no legal way for genuine asylum seekers to get into this country. So the government does have to deal with that if they want to continue to be a country of compassion, which we clearly do.
And very often people feel compelled to get to this country, whether it's from a small boat or indeed overstaying a visa on holiday, in order to then claim asylum after entering illegally, because there are so few ways to get in from, for example, another part of the world. If you're fleeing Venezuela from the tyrannical socialist regime there, then perhaps you might want to claim asylum in Britain. There's no legal route to do that as things stand. So perhaps this other half of this question is just as key as the deterrence side.
OK, Tom Harwood, thank you very much.
The time, 9 minutes past 8 o'clock. Today, notorious prisoner Charles Bronson will appear before a public parole board as he attempts to win his freedom. Despite being incarcerated for over 40 years, he's been married 3 times and has fathered 2 children.
Well, one of his sons, George Bambi, recently released a 2-part documentary about his dad and gave the public a never-seen-before look inside his dad's life, including his relationship with his family. Let's take a look.
And you and Michael are my world. I love you both the same. Different mums, same dad.
Yeah.
In 1975, my wife Irene come to visit me in Hull prison, and I just had one of the biggest beatings I've ever had in my life, and I deserved it. I attacked 3 prison officers, and one of them was an infamous jailer at that time. He used to give a lot out, you know. And I smashed his head in with a stick. And when I went on the visit, my Irene said to me that day, the way you're going, you will never get out, and you'll end up in an asylum.
Well, watching all that, listening to that and watching him, watching his dad, George Bambi, in the studio now. George, what's your relationship with your dad like?
Yeah, I have a very good relationship with Charlie. You know, we've had a good relationship for 6 or 7 years, and obviously since I first started visiting him and finding out he was my father, I've got to know him very well, like as a friend more than anything else. And obviously as a result of that attachment with Charlie, I've been campaigning to try and get him released and try and get his story out there to the world's media.
What is his story? You know, a lot of people may be saying, have you got nothing else better to do than to be pleading to get this guy out of prison? And then the truth is, they don't really know why he's in prison.
I know it's all like a really complicated situation, but the thing is, Charlie's been in prison for 48 years now, and he's never had his voice. I mean, in the past, there's prisoners like Des Nielsen and other high-profile prisoners where the Ministry of Justice have allowed the media to go in and interview these people and speak to them and talk to them about whatever. They've always denied that access to Charlie, so Charlie's never been able to have his word or have his say. So this documentary that I did with Channel 4, I was working on it for over 3 years. Unfortunately, I was able to video him. Obviously, I can't video him covertly inside the prison because it's a minimum 2-year prison sentence. But when COVID came along, they did a thing called purple visits. And when you do purple visits, I have my big laptop at home. They feed him in from the prison and we talk. And I had Channel 4 filming the whole thing. So it was an opportunity for him to talk.
And we'll be able to see him talk in this parole hearing, only the second time that's happened in history that this kind of thing's been publicised. I mean, do you, just in the time that you've known him, have you seen a change in him? Because he's been denied parole so many times before because of this worry that he's extremely violent, and there are psychiatric reports and all of that feeding into it. Do you think he stands a good chance today? And would you like to see him released?
Do you know what? I'm really pleased you've asked that question because people don't ask me questions that I want to be asked. And it's really refreshing. When I started seeing Charlie 7 years ago, he was in trouble all the time, he was violent, he wasn't speaking, you know, his mind wasn't right and all the rest of it. And during the course of our relationship, I've tried to educate him and help him and work with him to try and achieve the personality and the beliefs he needs to ultimately get him released. This documentary that we did, we had a lot of negative feedback from that because at the end of the documentary, they said something about, I was worried if he'd come out, he was going to stab me with a bread knife. I actually went on to say in the documentary he could stab me with a bread knife, but then I said anybody else in the street could stab me with a bread knife, but the only thing he'd ever stab me with would be a paintbrush because he's not a violent person, he's an artist, and he's rehabilitated himself for many, many years in the prison service. I mean, when I go to visit him at Wood Hill, I mean, you walk through all the wings and everything, there's music playing, it's like a big, massive disco everywhere. And I was talking to one of the prison officers and I said, what's going on here? I said, it's like a youth club. And they said, oh, we only have two prison officers on every wing now. If we go in and tell someone to turn the music off, the place will go up, so we just leave them to it.
But if he's not a violent person, why is he still in prison?
Well, he's not a violent prisoner now. He has been violent in the past. He's been really evil. He's been awful, and he's committed some awful crimes. But everybody's got a past, and Charlie's gone so long now, sort of staying out of trouble and behaving himself, and not getting involved in any stupid arguments and stuff. And if people fall out with him, he just walks away. He doesn't say anything anymore. I've had lots of conversations with him about Phil Danielson, the guy that he took hostage, the teacher. And I've been talking to him and I've been saying, look, this guy, you put him through a horrific ordeal. It was absolutely shocking.
You took him hostage in prison?
He took him hostage in HMP Hull many years ago. And I mean, this poor guy's had psychological problems, etc. And it's awful what's happened. And in the documentary that I made, I was responsible for the documentary, and Phil Danielson took part in that programme, and he expressed how it had affected his life, which was awful. But he also said at the end, Charlie's done 23 years now for what he did to me, and I think it's long enough. And if he was released, I shouldn't have any grounds for objection. And I mean, that's really good coming from his victim, because obviously that's the index case that he's been locked up for.
And how old is Dad?
70 years old. He don't want to come out and have a fight with anyone or cause any violence. He's an artist, he's an old man.
Yeah, but George, there will be people watching and listening to this, forgive me, there will be, who will just say, lock him up and throw away the key. They won't want to see him out on the streets. We've heard Dominic Raab saying that he is opposed to his release. And yet we've got cases like the murder of Joanna Brown, which has been in the news in the last week. She was attacked by her husband, murdered with a claw hammer.
Yeah.
And her murderer is being considered for parole. And there's a lot of people, again, you, I'm sure, would agree, there seems to be this kind of mismatch.
Yeah, there is. And that's another very good point, because the way that I see it and the way a lot of people, I mean, you know what it's like on social media. I mean, I've had people the last 3 days trolling me, saying they're going to kill me, kidnap me, do all sorts of stuff. I just laugh it off. Now, as far as people like that go, what you need to remember is, and what the public needs to remember, and what these trolls on the internet need to remember, this documentary that we did had no adverse effect on my dad's parole hearing. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to parole, there's 3 people that sit there and they don't look at newspaper articles, they don't look at TV programmes, they look at all the evidence in front of them. And every month for the last 4 years, I've been going into the top security maximum prisons and sitting there having management meetings with Charlie's psychologists, his welfare officers, the probation service, the governors, and we've all sat there, 12 of us in a room every month, and we've discussed everything. And, you know, there was a case where Charlie was considered a very high risk to causing harm to another prisoner. So I challenged this, and they said they were going to downgrade it to medium, to high risk, because he hadn't hurt a prisoner for so long. So then we went to the next meeting and they said, oh, the probation's come back and said, the prison officers, Ministry of Justice, sorry, have come back and said, we can't downgrade him to high risk. And I said, why not? And they said, well, his parole's coming up. If he kicks off in his parole, he could attack someone. So I said, well, hold on a minute. Yeah. You can't punish him before the parole. And that's what they've done. They've punished him all the time for stuff that he hasn't done. So anyway, I actually got it reversed and now he has been downgraded to minimum risk.
So come today. How can you tune into that one? They say it's public. How do you... must be a via website or something.
I think there's a live stream somewhere.
Yeah, live stream. What are his chances?
Well, the legal team that he's got is the team that I put together for him, and it was me that got the public parole for him, and I've worked tirelessly for years and years. Me and Charlie aren't talking at the minute, because after the documentary at the end, it portrayed me as... I was thinking my father was going to come out and be violent. That was completely not the case. It misrepresented me, and the way that it was edited was disgusting at the end, but it is what it is. But speaking to the legal team and speaking to everybody else, they reckon 6 years ago, it was 1% chance of getting out, 99% chance of staying in. As of today, they reckon it's a 60% chance of him getting out and a 40% chance of him being turned down.
And that could be today. He could walk out of the doors of...
He won't walk out the prison. He won't walk out the prison today. The system is the parole hearing will take place over a course of 3 days, which is quite unusual. Parole hearings usually last 2.5 hours. But we're talking about Charles Bronson. There's a lot of evidence for them to consider. So... when the parole hearing's finished, the parole board have 14 days by law. They have to write to Charlie in writing and give him the decision of the parole. And if that's favourable and it says he can be released, then it will probably take 6 weeks, 8 weeks while they sort out, obviously, a hostel or where he's going to settle and all the rest of it.
Goodness me, at 70, you know, it'd be a whole new life for him if it was to happen. George, thank you very much indeed. Why does he keep changing his name?
I've got no idea, but I mean, Charles Bronson's a stigma that's stuck with him for ages. He's changed his name to Charles Salvador after the artist Salvador Dali. Yeah. But regardless, it doesn't matter. Every time you see something in the paper, it's always Charles Bronson. Yeah, so might as well change his... If he could change his name to Houdini, it'd be good, wouldn't he? Be able to escape.
George Bambi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me on.
We'll find out, so maybe almost a 2/3 chance that Charles Bronson could be released today after 50 years in prison.
That's right, yeah.
Thank you very much, thank you. Right, the time is just approaching 8:20. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening news-wise.
The former Metropolitan Police officer Wayne Couzens will be sentenced later today for indecent exposure. The 50-year-old's already serving a whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard in 2021. The sentence today is for 3 incidents of flashing before killing Ms Everard, which he pleaded guilty to last month.
The Prime Minister says Britain will become a science and tech superpower by 2030. Rishi Sunak says the £360 million funding would position the country at the forefront of new technologies like AI and supercomputing. Mr Sunak says he hopes it can create more high-paid jobs in the future and grow the economy.
Boris Johnson has put his father, Stanley Johnson, forward for a knighthood as part of his resignation honours list. That's according to The Times. The former Prime Minister faced accusations of cronyism in 2020 after he nominated his brother Joe for a peerage.
Police in Wales searching for 3 women and 2 men have now found 3 of them dead, 2 seriously injured.
The 5 people were reported missing after a night out in Cardiff over the weekend. Authorities say 2 of them have been taken to hospital with serious injuries.
Well, let's now go to the head of news for Wales Online. That's Kieran Jones for the very latest on this sad situation. Kieran, can you describe to us, can you give us an insight into what seems to have happened?
Well, it's believed this group were out on Friday night in Newport at a social club there, and were then from there believed to have travelled down to Porthcawl. Now that's around 45 minutes or so away. So it's a fair old journey down to Porthcawl, and that was on Friday night as well. They were seen in a place there called Treco Bay Caravan Park. And then from there, they were then believed to have travelled to Cardiff. They were last seen in the Llanedin area of the city in the early hours of Saturday morning. Then from about 2 a.m. on Saturday, there's just no further contacts, no social media activity, no correspondence with family, friends, loved ones. And obviously over the weekend, those family and friends and loved ones have been understandably very, very concerned. It's entirely out of character, they say, for these 5 people to kind of go entirely off grid, if you like. And then very sadly, shortly after midnight this morning, so Monday morning, the car that they were believed to have been travelling in, a Volkswagen Tiguan, was found crashed off the road, off the A48 near St Mellons. So that's between Cardiff and Newport, so out to the east of Cardiff, effectively. And then from there, police say 3 of the people in the car were deceased. 2 of them seriously ill and now in hospital. So as you say, a very, very tragic situation, and just everybody hoping that those 2 people that were injured can pull through and make a recovery.
And are Gwent police looking for anybody else in connection with this, or have they said anything else about the sort of terms of the investigation?
So it wouldn't appear so. So far the appeals have been simply for information, and there hasn't been any suggestion that there's been something suspicious. I would assume their working hypothesis is that the car was probably travelling back to Newport, whether to drop people home or to meet somebody else or something like that, and has very sadly has veered off the road in tragic circumstances.
Okay. Kieran, got to leave it there. Thank you very much. Appreciate the update from you. Thank you very much. 23 minutes past 8.
Now, coming up, you might want to look away, Eamonn, I'm really sorry. We're going to be breaking down Liverpool's historic 7-0
Well, there's no time for sport.
Over Manchester United.
Couldn't possibly.
So you have to take it out with Paul, my friend.
Who's interested? Look at that.
A lot of Liverpool fans, let me tell you.
Do you even know who that is?
No idea. Never seen him from
He's
life.
one happy man.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Very nice to see you again. Coming up to 7:30. Still to come in today's programme.
8:45. Very exciting. We're going to be speaking to the royal author Tom Bower as the Sussexes indicate that they've received an email invitation to the coronation.
OK, what has Tom got to say about that? Join us 8:45 and find out. After 9 o'clock, we're going to get the view of Wes Streeting from Labour on the government's plan to stop small boat crossings.
And remember, you have an hour to get your thoughts in. Send in any of those via email, gbnews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GB News.
Right, Sue in Lincolnshire says, I agree with what Rishi's trying to do about boats. Also, immigration lawyers will lose some of their clients and money. I firmly believe they should not be allowed into our country. We cannot afford them. Arifa says, surely the cost of a flight to Rwanda and the running of a pretty sweet housing complex is the same, if not more, than housing migrants in the UK. And Jason says, these must be stopped, these crossings 100%. Come to the coastal towns of our country and you will see why we are angry. Get this sorted and get it sorted quickly, says Jason. So there we go. Nothing else to do. That's
We're going to get
go to the break.
Pages
We'll go,
now.
let's
We're
go
going
to the
through
break.
the back pages.
Sure,
Well, don't worry,
I don't
I'll
think we've
take control of this
I'm
section.
pretty
It's
sure
absolutely fine. Yeah.
I don't.
We're going to start with the Mirror. Oh, they're talking about Man United. I can't think why. Yeah, all the back pages, in fact, looking at Man United. Capitulation against Liverpool as the Red Devils lost 7-0 at Anfield. At the Times simply says 7-0 as Mo Salah broke Liverpool's all-time Premier League scoring record during the Reds' demolition, didn't write it myself, of Man United. And the Star finally says 7 out of 10 with Man United manager Erik ten Hag calling his side's performance in the second half unprofessional.
Well, that's exactly the word I would use towards you. Unprofessional.
I've been called a lot of things.
Did that make you happy? Does that make you happy?
It does, actually, weirdly. I'm quite enjoying it. I'm sorry.
Here with his take on...
It's as if someone's died.
Worse?
It's worse?
Worse than that. Paul Coyte, whose team also lost. Your Spurs lost to Wolves.
Don't you start about Spurs. Don't you start about Spurs.
Yeah, maybe we should just start with Spurs.
OK, I've got eggshells around here, which I'm going to be very, very careful.
Well, look. I mean, we won the League Cup last Sunday.
You did?
We came back in a comeback against West Ham on Wednesday night in the FA Cup.
A week is a long time in football, Eamonn. A week is a long time.
And then there was that fluke result yesterday.
It probably was a fluke result. I think it was. I think any 7-0 with two teams even is something strange.
Liverpool were the better team, there's no doubt.
Well, that's very big of you to say that when it's 7-0. I mean, come on.
But, the goals may be out of proportion, but the result is the right
43 minutes. So 43 minutes, it was an even game. And for the next 47 minutes, it's probably the worst 47 minutes in Manchester United's history.
Though I was at Brentford 4-0 down at half-time. That was
Well, this is pretty bad. I mean, Manchester United's worst loss since 1931.
Yeah, the thing I can't get, Paul, is, and a lot of United supporters can't get, is that the team is so good at the minute. And, you know, winning the League Cup last week, coming back against West Ham in the FA Cup on Wednesday night. You know, you could always lose at Anfield, of course, but to lose by 7.
There's a point when a team, we can say whether they capitulate. What point is that? Not after one, because they're still in the game. Second one goes in early. So that puts you on your back foot a little bit.
The wobblers there.
Worst loss against Liverpool ever, by the way.
Yeah, you said that.
No, I've already done. That's the worst loss since 31. This is the Liverpool game. That's another stat. I just thought.
Right. So anyway, what other sport was happening?
So anyway, there's a point when it capitulate. Is it 4, 5, 6? Maybe it was the 7th one that made them capitulate. But the thing is, I just want to know whether Erik ten Hag. I'm going to look at the positive for you. After that Brentford game, what he did was took the players out and said, right, you're going to run everywhere you didn't run, and I'm going to run with you. This time, I think he's going to say, you're going to run to Anfield and back, and I'm going to stay here and I'm going to sit down and have a cup of tea. Because it's how they react to that. I mean, it's unprecedented. It's just so... I mean, how did it make
you... keep saying that.
I know, but it's an incredible result. Whether it be bad, of course, it's awful for Manchester United. But just...
The Bahrain Grand Prix was marvellous.
Well,
was it marvellous?
It was. I mean, the thing is, it's one-sided. Red Bull, it's like... No, I'm not going to say it. Red Bull are so far in front of everybody, and you've got Max Verstappen, and who's won the title now for would be the 3rd year running. Sergio Perez. They're so far in front of everybody. This car is beating everybody, and so you've got people like George Russell, who drives a Mercedes. His quote is, "Red Bull have got this championship sewn up. I don't think anybody's going to be fighting with them this year. They should win every single race this season." Yeah. This is the first race of 23, and he's pretty much said, "Well, it's all over. There's no point in even going."
What's her name? Jerry Halliwell's husband owns that.
That's right. Yeah. That's Christian Horner. Christian Horner. Yeah. So they're just so far in front. So the thing is, there's other teams that are looking at this car thinking, well, maybe we can copy that and do something with it. Ferrari haven't, Mercedes haven't, where you've got Toto Wolff, who is he's the biggest rival to Christian Horner, because really it's about the two men that are actually running the teams more than it is the drivers. So he's now thinking, right, we've got to do something about this Mercedes. So it really isn't so much about the drivers, it's about the cars. And when you've got Drive to Survive, the documentary that they put on Netflix, they're thinking, well, George Russell's saying this is not going to be a very exciting season because they're going to run away with it, and it's all about 2nd and 3rd. So there you go. So Bahrain won very easily, and it's probably going to be like that for the rest of the season as well.
The European Indoor Championships came to an end.
Yes, they did. And Jasmine Sawyers. Now, I don't know if you remember, Jasmine Sawyers is our best long jumper. She was in The Voice a couple of years ago. She sang on The Voice. Very good, but she's an amazing long jumper. She was the captain. That's Keely Hodgkinson, by the way. Keely Hodgkinson, who won the 800 metres gold. Turned 21 last week. She's truly going to become the poster girl of British athletics because she's such a great runner. Now, her coach from when she was 10 passed away last week. Joe Galvin, his name was. So she wrote his name on the Union Jack flag. I know that you see it on the Union flag there. So everything was dedicated to him. Very emotional moment, but she is a terrific athlete. So she won the 800 metres and Jasmine won the long jump. But there was also another incident. I don't know whether you saw this. This was in the hurdles. It's in the 60-metre hurdles. Now, a guy called Enrique Lopez, who is you've got to be careful the way you say that, he is the Spanish hurdler. He had a very nasty fall on the last hurdle. So what's happened, he's caught the hurdle, he's landed face first and completely knocked himself out.
Oh, no.
Now, the Swiss Jason Joseph, he's the guy that won it. And the thing is, it was how he reacted to it. So he's won the race, giving it all the big one, really. And poor Joseph is laying there on the floor, and he was completely motionless for ages. So they had to bring ambulances in. They even had to put sheets around the outside while they're so worried about him. He is OK. So he sent a message from hospital. He's been OK. Knocked himself out. I mean, it's a dangerous sport if you catch that hurdle. But it was just how Joseph reacted. Never for a moment did he run over. Everything was doing the hearts and doing the celebrations, ran past him. Well, this guy's just laying flat out on the floor. But he is fine. He is absolutely fine.
Thank you, Paul.
Pleasure. How was it? Painless? It was OK, wasn't it?
An email saying, I'm so sorry I missed Eamonn going through the sport. Don't worry, you didn't miss it.
Do we have catch-up?
People were worried. We were overran on one of the items. They're like, oh, I'm so sad I missed Eamonn talking about Man United.
Well, we're going to go over it again in 10 minutes. Is that OK, just the goals?
Absolutely.
Coming up, wrap up warm today. Cold weather moving in. It's coming down from the Arctic. And we are discussing that Holidays Papers with Biggins and Anna Michalot.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here are the front pages on this Monday morning. Here's how we start the week. The Times, first of all, leading with the government's plans to ban asylum seekers who arrive in Britain on small boats.
The Eye is reporting the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are set to clash with Conservative MPs over their tax plans in the 2023 budget. That's happening next week.
Here's the Mirror. They say 11 million of us are suffering without dental care, patients even resorting to pulling their own teeth out as they wait for an appointment.
And The Sun says a Live Aid-style concert is being planned at Wembley in June to support the people of Ukraine. I love what they've done there. Lviv Aid play on the Live Aid, which we talked about earlier. It'd be lovely, wouldn't it?
It'd be wonderful, really good.
We're talking to Christopher Biggins and Anna Mikhailova to take us through the papers one last time. And Anna, we're going to start with you. This story inside the Times. Jeremy Hunt might have a bit more cash to play with than originally thought.
Yes, the magic money tree is at work here. So we've been told that Jeremy Hunt might have a £30 billion windfall to play with in the budget, and obviously this will lead to a lot of pressure for him to start giving people help with their energy bills, cost of living crisis. Obviously there'll also be pressure to boost defence spending, which is a big story currently, and big question is what'll he choose? Because 30 billion sounds big, but it's actually,
as soon as you mentioned
not
defence spending, I thought, that's that gone, then that's that.
And to put it into context, the reason it's 30 is because they thought that the amount spent on the energy crisis help was 177 billion, and it turns out to be a little bit less. So when you see it in that perspective, 30 may not buy that much, but hopefully it'll be a little bit better.
Give it the dentist, I say.
Well, that could well be the case, couldn't it, my friend? How do you see that dentist story? That's front page of the Mirror.
Well, we talked about it earlier, and I think it's terrible. I mean, it's rotten, like people's teeth. I mean, it's really painful to have toothache, and I think something should be done about it.
OK, Christopher, you have taken a story from The Telegraph, and this is no celebrities and no logos on a clothing brand.
You didn't mention the name.
No, I couldn't say the name.
No, I can't either.
Balenciaga.
Oh, right, there you go.
Balenciaga.
I chose this because I don't know who, but as you could tell, Balenciaga is.
Kim Kardashian's favourite designer. She wore everything Balenciaga for the last few years, which looked like body stockings, kind of knee-high boots, which turned into leggings, which turned into, on one occasion, a sort of gimp suit, I think, at the Met Gala. Often,
what's a gimp suit?
A gimp suit. Like over the face. You know, one of those ones where you can't see their faces.
Yeah, really attractive
Terribly
looking.
rude. Anyway,
the reason I've chosen this...
They got into a scandal, didn't they?
Yeah, but I have no idea. I have no interest.
Oh.
But the story I'm interested in is telling you is the picture that in the Telegraph today, I don't know if we've got it on camera, yes, that she is wearing an old suit of mine.
Is she?
Well, no, she's not, but I mean, look, it's huge.
But is that not what I'm doing today?
No, you haven't got sleeves that go down below.
Yours is very tight.
Yeah.
It's not. It's capacious.
But it's not. It's so ill-fitting, this jacket. And I just was appalled.
It's a boyfriend suit.
Is that what it's called?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah, they have those things. I know from my wife, she does these things, the boyfriend jeans, which are ridiculous. They're just a man's pair of jeans on a woman, and they're...
And I suppose they're tied with a belt, are they? So
it's not my cup of tea.
It's room to grow, comfortable Christmas pudding attire.
Exactly.
No, I think she looks ridiculous, this poor girl. So anyway, that's the reason I didn't know what they've gone bust.
Oh, well, no, they haven't gone bust. So there was a huge hoo-ha, wasn't there? Because their last campaign that they launched with Kim Kardashian's backing involved pictures and script from a series of paedophile cases. And it was seen to glorify... And it had a child with a teddy bear wearing... And it was sort of sexualisation and paedophilia. And it was a huge scandal. So Kim Kardashian had to distance herself from it. The whole line got withdrawn. And now they're saying no celebrities, no gimmicks, no taglines.
No branding even.
No branding.
No jacket.
How are you going to brand Matt Hancock after these revelations? I mean, honestly, the more I look at this, the more I think, what sort of Egypt was he that he would have handed over? I mean, it's really ridiculous. Why would you hand anyone 32,000 WhatsApp messages or whatever?
Someone who doesn't like you as well.
Yeah.
That was what was...
Well, we know how Matt Hancock brands himself, which is... so there's a story in The Telegraph, a slightly more humorous side to this, which shows the extent of how modest Mr Hancock is. So he calls himself Mr Vaccine. He calls something he did a Hancock triumph. So he's... I think it's the old thing, if no one's going to praise you, praise yourself.
Right.
He does it so well.
He does it so well. Yes. My favourite thing out of all this, and I love the way that The Telegraph actually prints the text messages, but the way the popularity of caps lock in Matt Hancock's messages. Everything's in caps, you know. It's always a sign of someone slightly on the edge, usually, when all the messages are in caps.
Thumping his message home. You're the deputy political editor at the Mail on Sunday. Is there any comeback from Hancock on this? Like, I mean, is he well and truly sunk after this?
I don't think he's sunk at all. I think his TV career will will only continue.
Really?
Well, he's already quitting, right? He's already going to set up a production company. He's going to follow on from I'm a Celebrity.
See, my point is, I'm not necessarily talking about a political career as such,
Right.
but I'm talking about, does he have a likability factor? I would suggest no.
No, I would
especially
suggest
after all
no
of this.
as well.
Right.
But he's got an infamy factor, I guess, and that's...
Infamy. They've all got an infamy.
OK, so is there... I mean, so he's certainly claimed this is a witch hunt and that people haven't seen the text in context.
Nor do we want to. 32,000, I mean, you can keep your context.
And the Telegraph is being clear on that. They're saying they haven't... He's suggesting they've almost edited the messages and been selective, and they've been very clear they've not edited. I actually watched a video on the Telegraph website of Claire Newell, who's the investigations editor, talking about how they've done all of this. It's really interesting. I mean, she is top class. The suggestion that she and her team would have done anything manipulative is ridiculous. And she says just how they had teams of people going through line by line, checking each other's work, making sure that everything was just done, nothing was missed, everything was presented accurately. So, yeah, he's saying that, but that is what...
But seriously, I go back to my initial point. Why would you hand over such a tranche of messages and expect there to be no comeback on this? The non-disclosure agreement, he thought that covered him with everything?
And as lawyers have said, that was extremely foolish.
Will Isabel Oakeshott still get her share of his sales from his book, even though she's now broken her NDA?
Yes, I'm sure she will.
Boggles.
I'm sure she will.
Because she didn't feel the public interest was incredibly pressing at the time of publication.
No.
I also think twists...
all to do with money.
Plot twists a bit further. Biggins, you're off to the theatre tonight for an opening night.
I am. I'm going to see The Bake Off, the musical, which I saw in Cheltenham last year, and it's fantastic. We really had a good time, so I'm really looking forward to it tonight.
And I was walking through the West End the other day and I saw Cheryl's face, as in Cheryl Cole from Girls Aloud.
Yes.
She's in the West End at the moment and she's back in the news for...
Yes,
all the wrong
I know.
reasons.
Yeah, it's a terrible story, this. Stalker's vile notes to Cheryl in flowers. This person, the stalker, sent flowers to her with a terrible note. Menacing message saying, we quite know what the message was. But anyway, what it's saying is, you get people at stage... I don't think actors ever get... Really. I mean, actors are brilliant. You go and see a play and it's a great success. You go to the stage door and it's crammed with like 150 people there wanting to be nice to the actors. Whereas this, they're now worried about Cheryl's safety. And I can understand why, but I think she's a sex symbol and, people, I think, really want to do something to her, whether it be good or bad.
Oh, dear.
And this is not a very good story.
Well, let me tell you something. I was behind a bus the other day and it had the number 2.22 came up on it. And I woke up that night and the time on the clock was 2:22.
No.
Yeah?
What's that got to do with anything?
Because that's the ghost story. That's the
that's the
production
name of
she's
her
in.
show.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're right, Judith, of course.
You two are stupid.
I didn't know what her show was called. 2:22
Anna, this is what I've got to deal with day after day. Day after day.
That's a lovely story.
What's that got to do with anything? Anyway.
Soz.
We won the bus,
Lovely to have you aboard.
We went on the bus.
He was behind the bus.
Never mind, I'm still here. I mightn't be for much longer. Thanks, Biggins. Thank you very much, Anna. Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Now we're talking about Harry and Meghan. We're talking about invites to the Coronation and what's going to happen there. Well, having his say and his opinion about it, because Harry did this big interview, I think it was over the weekend, with this, what would you call him?
Psychotherapist?
Yeah, the very person, trauma expert. And he was diagnosed during this interview with attention deficit disorder. Royal biographer Tom Bauer. I believe, Tom, you saw the interview. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yeah, Tom, what did you think of how Harry performed in front of this this trauma expert?
Well, I think it was pretty cringe-making, actually. I mean, it was so self-indulgent, anguish, money-making, and, of course, his promotion that drugs helped him, even the most dangerous drugs, psychedelic drugs, was quite reckless. So I think he is dim. I think he is self-interested. And I think he's pretty dangerous by now. But in the end, it's all about money. He is doing that to boost sales of his book and boost himself, and that's pretty tragic for a member of the royal family.
Some people describing it sort of monetising victimhood or monetising trauma, or another person I saw describing it as milking Diana's death. But, I mean, does he ever think about the consequences of any of these things? Again, it was pointed out to me that talking about taking psychedelic drugs and his use of drugs even in royal property, if the papers are to be believed this morning, could that have implications for visa applications to become a US citizen?
Well, it could, yes, although I can't imagine the American government will ban Prince Harry. But I think what it shows is what a grubby life he is now leading, in the sense that he's only interested in promoting himself and, of course, Meghan, and getting money out of being a member of the royal family, and not being in any way responsible for what he's saying anymore, or what the damage he's causing to his family in Britain. The damage is, unfortunately, pretty great. I mean, Britain's reputation each time he appears sinks a little further. And so he is so greedy. He is so in the end venal, I believe, by now. It's vulgar. And if only it could stop. But I think the idea that he should come to Britain for the coronation is now quite repellent.
Really? I mean, you think, I mean, as far as we're led to believe, an invite has been issued, and they, Harry and Meghan, are taking their time before they consider their response. So the options are they go or they don't go. What would negate against them coming here?
Well, I think it's inevitable that King Charles wants to invite his son. But I think that the way to deter him coming is to suggest that he sits right at the back behind a column, and that's the seat he'll be given, and then he'll get the message. I don't believe some of these leaks at the moment. After all, we've heard earlier that the Archbishop of Canterbury was negotiating reconciliation. Well, I thought that was a red herring. I think Harry wants always to be in the news. That is the point. The only way they can sell the book is by being in the news. And yesterday's conversation with this very weird quack, Garbo Mate, about drugs and therapy and all that, is all about promoting Harry, a victim undoubtedly of mental health problems. There's no doubt about it. But the way his solutions and his cures now are reaching into the danger territory.
Tom, I've got to ask you about another person who loves being in the headlines, and that is, of course, Boris Johnson, who you've also written a biography of. What do you make of these latest developments, these new pictures at him at lockdown-busting parties, but more importantly, these 4 occasions when the Parliamentary Privileges Committee believed that he may have misled Parliament?
Look, Boris is undoubtedly a charismatic and hugely popular politician amongst some. It's a huge disappointment that he lied to Parliament, clearly, about Chris Pincher and probably about the parties. I thought today's story that his father is to get a knighthood is even more shocking. I mean, here is a man who, according to his ex-wife, undoubtedly true because he admits it, consistently bullied and even hit her over the period of their marriage. The woman was driven into a depression and had to receive mental health treatment because of Stanley Johnson's behaviour. So what is really unfolding at the moment is the most unsavoury spectacle of the Johnson family. Boris accused of lying by the Parliamentary Committee, having admitted having been kicked out of office because of his dishonesty, and now rewarding his father for no reason at all, with a knighthood apparently, just because he's his father. But the father himself is a man of very questionable reputation. So it's a pretty bad day, I think, for the Johnsons.
Tom, just to finish off, we've got 10 seconds. Harry and Meghan, will we see one of them or both of them at the coronation?
My guess is neither of them.
Coronation chickens.
Interesting. Coronation chickens. You're full of it today. You're very good. Very good. Tom Bauer, really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. He is the royal biographer. Thank you very much indeed. With that, 5 minutes before 9. Stay with us. We're going to get Labour's response to the government's new plan to tackle the small boat crisis.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. The week ahead, well, it's looking cold for many of us. We will see some snow, particularly in the north, but quite widely frost and ice. So looking at the bigger picture, and we have northerly winds being introduced from the Arctic right across the UK, so it will feel cold over the next few days with the risk of snow in places too. This morning it is a chilly start across many areas. There's quite a lot of clouds, some showery outbreaks of rain across England and Wales, sunny spells elsewhere, but already snow showers moving in across parts of Scotland. Met Office warning for snow and ice, so some tricky travelling conditions over the next few days here. Cold feeling afternoon, particularly across the northern half of the UK here. Temperatures really struggling at 2 to 5 Celsius. Further south, 7 to 9, perhaps 10 in the far south of England initially, but even here temperatures will start slipping away later on into the evening time. Under the clearer skies, temperatures quickly falling below freezing this evening. Further snow showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland and northeast England too. The risk of some patchy rain and snow also moving into southern parts of Wales, southern England, but there's a bit of uncertainty with this, as do stay tuned to the forecast, but temperatures widely below freezing, so some icy stretches to take us into Tuesday morning. Early rain and snow across southern counties should start to push away. Elsewhere, cold, a sunny, frosty, icy start to the day. Further snow showers through Tuesday across northern Scotland into Northern Ireland and northeast England, but plenty of sunny spells too. And with that northerly wind, it will be a cold feeling day for everyone, 2 to 5 Celsius generally for many. Over the next few days, it does stay very chilly. We will continue to see the risk of snow, particularly across northern and eastern parts of the UK. There are signs as we get to Friday, it'll just start to turn a little bit less cold as weather systems start to move in from the Atlantic. I'll see you again soon.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Detain, deport, ban. The government prepares a new crackdown on small boat crossings.
Hello there, very good morning to you, wherever you're watching or listening from. The time is 9:01 on this Monday, the 6th of March. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Asylum seekers who cross the Channel in small boats will be removed from the country and banned from returning under new plans to be announced by the Home Secretary. Earlier, Science Secretary Michelle Donlan told us the current figures demand immediate action.
Figures are absolutely staggering. Just a few years ago, the figures were around the 300 mark. Now we're looking at 45,000 people last year coming here illegally. That cannot be right.
Police searching for 5 people who disappeared after a night out in Cardiff have found 3 of them dead, with the 2 others taken to hospital with serious injuries. The group were last seen in the Welsh capital in the early hours of Saturday. We'll have all the latest on that developing story for you.
The country's most notorious prisoner, Charles Bronson, will launch a bid for freedom at a hearing today. The parole board review will make Bronson the second inmate in British legal history to have his case heard in public.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have been invited to the King's coronation. A spokesperson said Harry and Meghan received an email from the King, but the statement did not disclose whether or not they would attend.
Thanks for your comments and your opinions throughout the programme this morning. We're on air until 9:30. GBviews at gbnews.uk. The story we're concentrating on this morning is the government setting to announce a fresh crackdown on illegal migration, with asylum seekers who enter the UK via small boats facing immediate removal and a lifetime ban.
Yes, the £3 billion plan could see thousands sent to Rwanda and other countries using a so-called human rights break to stop lawyers from interfering with deportation flights.
Now, earlier we spoke to Government Minister Michelle Donlan, who said this new proposal doesn't mean the government closes the door to legal asylum seekers.
I think there's been a lot of speculation before the bill's actually been published. That will be forthcoming in the coming days. It will come to Parliament and people will be able to scrutinise that in detail. But what I can tell you is the basic principle is if you come here illegally, you shouldn't be able to stay. We're all in favour of people trying to gain asylum legally. We're talking about a process which is propped up by criminal gangs that exploit desperate people and also people that have crossed many different countries to get here, many safe countries. It cannot be right that we continue to let that happen.
Well, joining us now is our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Tom, everyone's agreed in what the problem is. The question is whether or not these new measures, which we have to be clear, we haven't actually seen the text of it yet, but from what's been briefed so far, does it look like it could work?
Well, there's 2 big strands to what the government is suggesting this morning. And, of course, we will see the text of this deal likely tomorrow of the legislation that will be put before the House of Commons. But, crucially, this is about stopping people from having that incentive to come to the United Kingdom. Anyone who crosses the Channel illegally or uses irregular means to enter the country, read that as illegally migrating into the country, will be deported to a safe third country and crucially have a lifetime ban from ever returning as a visitor or to try and gain citizenship. And this is meant to really put off those who try and think that it's an easier way to get in via illegal means, to circumvent the legal routes that are in place. But the other half of this equation, of course, is to make sure that there are legal routes for those legal migrants to do things by the book and do things properly. It's two prongs.
Perfect. Tom Howard, thank you very much. We'll get some more analysis from you in just a moment.
Let's go to the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who's standing by this morning. As we say, good morning to you, Wes. Just before we get down to detail, because it's a very, very important thing you're talking about, which is a shortage of midwives around the country. Just your reaction to the migrant situation and government proposals as to what they plan to do about it.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to work at all, to be honest. And I think people, particularly who live along the coast, who literally see the consequences of these boat crossings washing up on their shores, I think they are absolutely sick of the gimmicks and the broken promises. There's not much different in terms of what the government's trailed in the media in recent days to what they put forward in their Nationality and Borders Bill last year. The truth is that to tackle small boat crossings, they have to do a number of things which don't grab the headlines and might sound a bit tedious and dull, but are actually the hard graft needed to sort it out. We need to speed up the processing of asylum claims. Fewer than 1% of small boat crossings in the last year have had their claims processed. That's the disgrace. Secondly, they've got to make sure that where people's applications are declined, that they're returned back to their country of origin as quickly as possible. The numbers there are down 80% compared to when Labour left office 13 years ago. And finally, we've got loads of criminal gangs in this country that are involved in this trafficking of people. Why not direct the hundreds of millions of pounds that are being wasted on the failed Rwanda scheme into the National Crime Agency so we can sweep these people up and put them behind bars? I think those are the practical steps that might give us a fighting chance of sorting out these small boat crossings. What the government's announced is a headline-grabbing gimmick that I just don't think will work in practice.
Two of your points there, definitely things that the Prime Minister has identified as being important, the speeding up of processing and the like. But the deterrent element, I notice you haven't talked about. There has to be a genuine deterrent element to what the government's proposing today, has it not? And that's got to try and go some way to stop what's also incredibly dangerous as well as costly for us here in the UK.
It is very dangerous, these crossings, very, very dangerous indeed. I think we've got to think about some of the people that are involved in this and people who are taking that risk of coming across. I'm not sure that any government messaging campaign about the deterrent would work effectively. And then there's a question of enforcement. I mean, short of tattooing their foreheads, how are we sure those people aren't going to try and come back in through another route? We do need safe and legal routes to work. The Afghan resettlement scheme, by the way, which is meant to do that, saw just 22 people come through Pathway 2 last year, compared with more than 8,500. And as for the who came via small boats, and as for the blanket ban, there's one case I was reading about recently of the Afghan veteran who had literally fought for our country and had come across on a small boat. And I thought, you know, we'd already failed that man with the way in which we withdrew from Afghanistan. We'd failed that man again by not providing him a safe and legal route to get here that he could use. Would we seriously fail a veteran like that and say, well, sorry, mate, because you came via a small boat, we're going to send you back even though you fought for our country? I don't think that's where the public are, actually. I don't think it's the right thing to do. What they do want is an immigration system they can have confidence in. They don't mind us taking refugees, genuine refugees. What they do mind is that it's hard to distinguish between genuine refugees and people who aren't, because we're not processing the claims. And even when we do process them, we don't send people back. That's what people are angry about, and that's what needs to be sorted out.
You're angry about midwives and you're fighting for midwives, Wes, and as the Shadow Health Secretary, and I just wanted to ring fence what time you've got to talk about that. I've 4 children, and I remember each time, Wes, coming out of the birthing room and thinking, just thanking God, literally thanking God for midwives.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. And the truth is today there aren't enough of them. The ones that we do have are leaving faster than they can be replaced. And so the government's got to do 2 things. One is settle these pay talks and put in place measures to keep the midwives that we do have, because we can't afford to lose them. And secondly, they've got to adopt Labour's plan for the biggest expansion of NHS staff in history, not just doubling the number of medical school places to train more doctors, but also the clinical training places for nursing and midwifery students, so that we can recruit the staff we need to get patients treated on time. Because I can't imagine what mums are going through when they're being turned away from the hospital they expected to give birth at because it's closed because there aren't enough staff. It's unsafe. It's not fair, and we've got to get a grip on this.
We could have equally talked about dentists today. That's the front page lead on the Mirror today about the shortage there. But basically, at the end of the day, all of these things require money. How would you pay for the training and the recruitment of more midwives?
So it would cost £1.6 billion, the whole package of doubling the number of medical school places and the nursing and midwifery clinical training placements, as well as some other measures around district nursing, health visitors and so on. We could do that by abolishing the non-dom tax status, because we think people who make Britain their home should pay their taxes here too. Jeremy Hunt, when he was chair of the Health Select Committee, actually welcomed Labour's plan and urged the government to adopt it on the basis that smart governments nick the best ideas of their opponents. Now, I know this Conservative government isn't very smart, but I'd hope that Jeremy Hunt remembers what he says. He's the Chancellor now, the budget's coming up, and Jeremy, if you're watching, adopt Labour's plan. You said you support it. We'll cheer you on if you do, because we desperately need to recruit those people. It takes years to train them up, so there's no time like the present. Let's use the budget to get cracking on that important work.
Before I let you go, Wes, I've got to ask you about Sue Gray. Are you able to shed any light on when a neutral civil servant began secret discussions with the leader of your party, Sir Keir Starmer?
I don't know precisely when the discussion started. Sue Gray will need to provide those details when she goes through the proper process as she begins today. That's the way we govern these sorts of things. It's not the first time, by the way, a senior official has undertaken this type of role. We think back to Ed Llewellyn, who was a senior diplomat who worked for David Cameron as his chief of staff and then went back to being a diplomat afterwards. So it's not that unusual, and there is a process, and it's right that process should take its course.
OK, Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary. Good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. At 12 minutes past 9, police in Wales searching for 3 women and 2 men have now found 3 of them dead, 2 seriously injured.
The 5 people were reported missing after a night out in Cardiff over the weekend. Authorities say 2 of them have been taken to hospital with serious injuries.
Our Home Security editor Mark White joins us in the studio now to update. It's a very sad situation.
Yeah, absolutely tragic and horrifying that these people were lying in that car effectively for close to 2 days before they were found. We don't know what effect, if any, that had on the number of fatalities, whether people might have survived. But this group, 3 women and 2 men, were on a night out. They'd been in Newport to a club. They'd been seen in a club on Friday night. They then headed down to Porthcawl, about 45 minutes away. They were seen at a caravan site near Porthcawl before then heading back towards Cardiff, again seen in Cardiff until about the early hours of Saturday morning. Then they disappeared. They simply disappeared off the radar. The social media messages stopped. Nothing was heard from them. Clearly, their families were very concerned, reported them missing, and there was this search. And then finally, this vehicle turned up off the A48, so it had, by the looks of it, careered off the road. It must have been partially hidden, or it would have been spotted. And so they were lying there, as I say, for close to 2 days. It's just utterly horrific. An investigation is underway. We know that one of the 3 women is among those injured. We don't know the identities of the other person who was injured and indeed those killed.
Thanks, Mark. I'll leave it there. Thank you. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise. Former Metropolitan Police Officer Wayne Couzens will be sentenced later today for indecent exposure. The 50-year-old is already serving a whole life sentence for the murder of Sarah Everard in 2021. The sentence today is for 3 incidents of flashing before killing Ms. Everard, which he pleaded guilty to last month.
The Prime Minister says the UK will become a science and tech superpower by 2030. Rishi Sunak says the £360 million funding would position the country at the forefront of new technologies like AI and supercomputing. Mr Sunak says he hopes it can create more high-paid jobs in the future and grow the economy.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have received an invitation to King Charles's coronation. They've been in correspondence by email with the King's office, but have not said whether they will attend or not. A new look to the schedule here on GB News. We're joined by Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce, who are launching a brand new show from 9:30 this morning. And the thing is, who would have thought putting you two together?
Well, I think it's a great idea.
I didn't say it wasn't.
Did you notice? We're even colour coordinated. How about that?
I saw him on the telly this morning earlier and I noticed the pink. And I thought I will coordinate.
You may agree on that, but you two, I know from the past, have not agreed on everything, Andrew.
I think the less we agree on, the better. Makes for a much livelier TV and radio.
But it's going to be fun. It's it's an amazing news day. We've got so much to talk about. All the COVID file revelations over the weekend. We're going to be unpicking those. We've got Jacob Rees-Mogg coming in and Nigel Farage as well. He's going to be talking to us. We've got Amanda Patel, Kevin Maguire, your mate, is coming in as well.
Somebody else to fight with.
Always fight with him.
Yeah, we got the big immigration story that you guys have been talking about as well.
Are you going to be talking about the Sussexes?
Of course.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. They still won't tell us. Are they coming or aren't they? Trying to maintain the suspense.
I've come up
right
with the new the name Coronation Chicken.
Yeah.
I don't think that he's going to come. You can have that one.
Well,
that's brilliant. I love that.
I suspect they'll be booed if they do come.
I think there's a risk, especially after all.
Well, they were
the
booed at the
revelations.
Platinum.
Well, it's their baby's, and it's their baby's birthday.
Fourth birthday that day.
So, I think Meghan Markle will use that as an excuse not to come.
That's
Also,
relief.
then it
And what a
casts her
relief.
as this fabulous mother, doesn't it? Look, I'm sacrificing going to the coronation because I'm hosting.
She's all heart, isn't she?
So the two of you are going to bring a lot of energy and a lot of debate and a lot of argument, then obviously to the way you look at things. Maybe.
He's brought a terrible-looking cup of tea. It's the first time we've worked together, and Andrew's tea is not a normal colour to have.
That's the
first thing I've heard.
Which I'm sure you're going to be.
Yeah, strong, dark and strong, like I was about to say, like my men. But I won't say that. Too early for that sort of cheap remark.
It's all right, we've had Biggins on this morning.
They're wonderful Biggins. He's a joy.
We've already had all of that.
Yeah.
Guys, look forward to seeing you from 9:30.
Don't forget to talk about the football, It's been
yes,
fun.
Eamonn.
Do we have to? No, thanks.
How many did your team
So,
lose by?
17 minutes past 9.
7-0.
We'll take a break as the...
Humiliation for Eamonn Holmes.
These two.
Humiliation, total and abject humiliation, actually.
These two from 9:30.
Good luck.
As notorious inmate Charles Bronson prepares to face a public parole hearing later today, we're going to hear from his son George, who's spearheading the campaign for his release.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 9:21. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's lovely to be back. Today, though, we've got a big story that we featured throughout the programme today, and which you guys have a big interest in, and that is Charles Bronson, now Charles Salvador. Yeah, he calls himself, because he's an artist now. He's going to appear before a public parole board as he attempts to get out of jail, basically after... What? How long?
Well, nearly 50 years, but nevertheless, he's been married 3 times. He's fathered 2 children, and earlier we spoke to one of his sons, George Bambi, who told us how he discovered he was Bronson's son.
A good relationship for 6 or 7 years, and obviously since I first started visiting him and finding out he was my father, I've got to know him very well, like as a friend more than anything else. And obviously as a result of that attachment with Charlie, I've been campaigning to try and get him released and try and get his story out there to the world's media.
What is his story? You know, a lot of people may be saying, have you got nothing else better to do than to be pleading to get this guy out of prison? And then the truth is, they don't really know why he's in prison.
I know it's all like a really complicated situation, but the thing is, Charlie's been in prison for 48 years now, and he's never had his voice. I mean, in the past, there's prisoners like Des Nielsen and other high-profile prisoners where the Ministry of Justice have allowed the media to go in and interview these people and speak to them and talk to them about whatever. They've always denied that access to Charlie, so Charlie's never been able to have his word or have his say. So this documentary that I did with Channel 4, I was working on it for over 3 years. Unfortunately, I was able to video him. Obviously, I can't video him covertly inside the prison because it's a minimum 2-year prison sentence. But when COVID came along, they did a thing called Purple Visits. And when you do Purple Visits, I have my big laptop at home. They feed him in from the prison and we talk. And I had Channel 4 filming the whole thing. So it was an opportunity for him to talk.
And we'll be able to see him talk in this parole hearing, only the second time that's happened in history that this kind of thing's been publicised. I mean, do you, just in the time that you've known him, have you seen a change in him? Because he's been denied parole so many times before because of this worry that he's extremely violent, and there are psychiatric reports and all of that feeding into it. Do you think he stands a good chance today? And would you like to see him released?
Do you know what? I'm really pleased you've asked that question, because people don't ask me questions that I want to be asked. And it's really refreshing. When I started seeing Charlie 7 years ago, he was in trouble all the time, he was violent, he wasn't speaking, you know, his mind wasn't right and all the rest of it. And during the course of our relationship, I've tried to educate him and help him and work with him to try and achieve the personality and the beliefs he needs to ultimately get him released. This documentary that we did, we had a lot of negative feedback from that, because at the end of the documentary, they said something about, I was worried if he'd come out, he was going to stab me with a bread knife. I actually went on to say in the documentary he could stab me with a bread knife, but then I said anybody else in the street could stab me with a bread knife, but the only thing he'd ever stab me with would be a paintbrush, because he's not a violent person, he's an artist, and he's rehabilitated himself for many, many years in the prison service. I mean, when I go to visit him at Wood Hill, I mean, you walk through all the wings and everything, there's music playing, it's like a big, massive disco everywhere. And I was talking to one of the prison officers and I said, what's going on here? I said, it's like a youth club. And they said, oh, we only have two prison officers on every wing now. If we go in and tell someone to turn the music off, the place will go up, so we just leave them to it.
That was probably just going to be my most pertinent question coming out there. Instead of...
Cut it off.
Just cut it off.
You can watch it in full on the app, though, if you want to watch it back. It was a good interview.
But more importantly, I mean, you can go online and watch the the parole hearing. Is that what it is?
Fascinating, yeah. We'll hear all of his background and psychiatric reports, and apparently, according to his son then anyway, he's saying he's been out of trouble for the last 7 years or so, so we'll find out if that is the case. And Dominic Raab not in favour of his parole being granted.
He's not in favour of anything, though, is he? But he is he?
Well, he's probably quite a tough character to get past.
He certainly likes to act hard. So there we go. We're going to say goodbye to you today. We're going to be back from 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. But, as we mentioned 5 minutes ago...
Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce are launching their new show, and we can cross to them now. Bev and Andrew.
Very good morning. It is Monday, the 6th of March at 9:30.
And we're talking a lot. We're talking about, will Rishi Sunak's new plan to stop those migrant crossings have any chance of succeeding? We're also getting the latest on the lockdown files. Harry and Meghan, can you bear it? Will they or won't they go to the coronation in May? Who cares?
Guys, thank you very much indeed. We will look forward to that. People are saying, as regards migrants, how can we accept more asylum seekers when you cannot get a doctor, a dentist or social housing? Because that's you're forming the connection between both those things. OK.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.